Chapter 2402. Dialogue with the Great Emperor. Except for the divine prefecture, the cultivators across various worlds were pleading on Futian's behalf. What was happening now seemed a little strange. Even Futian himself looked puzzled above the sky. The Dark World and the empty Divine Realm were both principalities that had grievances against him, while he had never had many interactions with the human realm. On the contrary, the human realm was closer to the imperial palace in the divine prefecture. But now, they were advocating on his behalf. No doubt, the Dark World and the empty Divine Realm each have their own schemes, while the human realm seemed to be more concerned with the reputation of Donghuang the Great. As for the specific thoughts behind the action of each principality, it was something that only they know. Now, the problem was left in the hands of Princess Donghuang. She saw the situation unfolding in front of her. Those radiant, beautiful eyes of hers looked at Futian above the sky as she said coldly, Futian violated the order of the imperial palace, and this is impertinent enough to declare war. It is an unforgivable offense. Princess Donghuang pressed too hard. Isn't it normal that others would resist under such circumstances? The top figures from the Dark Court said casually, seemingly taking Futian's side. Judging from their posture, it seemed as if they were ready to intervene by force in order to prevent the people from the divine prefecture from taking action. Feng Ru levitated into the air, and the cultivators from the Dark Court and the empty Divine Realm were also standing in the vicinity, ready to battle at a moment's notice. If you insist on interfering in the matters of the divine prefecture, I will have no choice but to ask my father to adjudicate, Princess Donghuang said indifferently. Everyone who heard her narrowed their eyes slightly. Asking Donghuang the Great to adjudicate. Divine light dazzled upon Princess Donghuang, and a terrifying divine might was released from her. In an instant, the divine light seemed to spill down from the sky, penetrating through the starry sky world as if from the outer world. As this divine light enveloped this boundless space, an inordinately strong emperor's might effused from Princess Donghuang. Yonder, an elusive figure appeared. Clearly, it was not Donghuang the Great, but a projection of the great emperor onto the world. At this moment, cultivators from all sides, no matter who they were, lowered their heads and said, "Greetings to Donghuang the Great." "Greetings, great emperor," others said. Even most of the cultivators from the Dark Court, the empty Divine Realm, and the Devil World saluted the great emperor to show their respect. Although they were on the opposing side, the great emperor was a supreme existence, and they were not opponents of Donghuang the Great in any way. In the presence of such supreme existence, even if they were hostiles, they still had to observe the necessary formalities. The phantom did not speak, but looked at Futian, who was above the starry sky. Futian's heart trembled when he saw that figure. Once, he had seen the afterimage of Donghuang the Great on Sky Mountain. This time, it seemed that he was closer. He didn't expect that the great emperor would visit the original realm in person because of him. Feng Ru stepped aside and bowed, leaving it to Donghuang the Great to decide. Donghuang the Great kept his eyes on Futian, which made Futian feel an inexplicable coercion. Those eyes were so profound that he could not fathom any emotions within them. "It's pretty impressive for you to obtain the inheritance of Ziwei, the Great until this day," Donghuang the Great said. "This is a feat worthy of being his successor." The words of Donghuang the Great shocked all the cultivators who heard him. The great emperor had spoken and personally stated Futian's identity. He was indeed the heir of Emperor Yiqing. No wonder Futian didn't quite understand everything. Maybe he could be considered half an heir of Emperor Yiqing, but he was far from being his successor. They had met just that one time, but Emperor Yiqing knew of his true identity. But could Donghuang the Great really be in the dark about who he really was, even confusing him with the successor of Emperor Yiqing? Great Emperor, so many years have passed since the events of yesteryear. Perhaps the great emperor already left those things behind. The top cultivator from the human realm spoke with lowered head. Donghuang the Great glanced at the speaker, but did not say a word. He continued to stare at Futian. At this moment, another astonishing aura descended from above, which alarmed everyone present. Another super-powerful aura. Who could it be? Donghuang. A voice was heard from the sky, and the crowd looked in the direction where the voice came from. A space-time passage seemed to have opened above the firmament. An image appeared at the end of the passage. It appeared to be a simple courtyard with a figure sitting quietly in the middle of it. The figure was looking in their direction. An endless distance separated them. Many people were shocked beyond words. How far away was this person? Teacher, it's been a long time. Donghuang the Great looked at the figure in the courtyard and talked to him from across the air. That figure, surprisingly, was the teacher of Four Corner Village. Indeed, it has been many years, the teacher said. I still remember when you first came to the village once upon a time. Many years later, Futian came as well, and I felt some similarities between the two of you. Specifically, that you are one of a kind. I didn't know the teacher holds him in such high regard. Donghuang the Great said, no wonder he was selected. This young lad is really not bad. Perhaps, in the future, he might have the opportunity to chase in your footsteps, the teacher continued. But Donghuang the Great smiled when he heard these words and said, since the teacher sees it this way, I am also curious now to see how far this lad can go in the future. Well, if so, I won't say more. If you have the time, come and visit the village sometimes, said the teacher. Definitely, Donghuang the Great nodded. Then the divine light retracted as the passageway disappeared along with the teacher's figure, which had now disappeared from the imagery. Everything returned to normal. It was as if everything that had just happened was an illusion, that nothing had really transpired. But it was also real. Was the dialogue between two great emperors real? From beginning to end, the teacher had never begged Donghuang the Great to spare Futian. It was more like a casual chat between two old friends. However, these few random words seemed to have determined Futian's fate. They could see that Donghuang the Great had agreed to let Futian go. The teacher said that perhaps Futian could walk in his footsteps, and Donghuang the Great said that was something he would like to see. As the world knew, Donghuang the Great was an unparalleled character. Emperor Yi Qing had already perished. Would Donghuang the Great care about a young lad? The great emperor who had suppressed an entire era was such a mighty existence. Would he be afraid of a young lad who might threaten him? Of course not. He was Donghuang the Great. You can handle the matters here yourself. Donghuang the Great left with one last command, then looked at Futian one last time. His figure gradually dissipated. Afterward, it was as if he had never appeared in the first place. The last sentence was clearly addressing Princess Donghuang, telling her to conclude the matter at hand. Clearly, he did not intend to take action against Futian himself. Phew! At this moment, the Heavenly Mandate Academy and other cultivators let out a deep breath. Was this over now? At the end of the day, they never expected that cultivators from all the worlds would stand up to protect Futian, or that the teacher from Four Corner Village would have opened up a channel to start a dialogue with Donghuang the Great so that Futian's life could be spared. Chapter 2403, Life After Catastrophe. Donghuang the Great had decided not to take action against Futian, which meant that the imperial palace of the Divine Prefecture would no longer pose a threat to Futian. Everyone had thought that Futian was a dead man for sure, but they never expected such a dramatic turn of events. What would Princess Donghuang do next? Futian was considered very powerful in the original realm. Although he was far from capable of contending alone with the many forces in the Divine Prefecture, in one-on-one situations, there was no single force below the level of Ancient God Clan that Futian couldn't overcome. Counting in the strength from the Lost Clan, then even the Ancient God Clan was no competition. No one was off-limit, given the power controlled by Futian. Even the Ancient God Clan might even be suppressed. Futian had been confirmed as the successor of Emperor Yi Qing, thus making him an enemy of the Imperial Palace and Divine Prefecture by default. Would Princess Donghuang allow him to continue developing his own power freely? But Donghuang the Great had already said that he wanted to see where Futian could go in the future. Clearly, he didn't care. How could a great emperor, unparalleled in the world, possibly be afraid of a young lad? In the many years that had passed, how many great emperors, such as Donghuang the Great, had come to pass in this world? Everyone's attention was fixed on Princess Donghuang. She was looking at Futian above the firmament right now and proclaimed, "From this day forward, principalities belonging to Futian will no longer be ruled by the Divine Prefecture. Ziwei Segmentum may make a choice," same as the various forces currently under the rule of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. As for the Lost Clan, which had already agreed to submit under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Palace, it may no longer be involved with Futian henceforth. Once, when all the forces laid siege upon the Lost Clan, she came forward and saved them. The agreement was for the Lost Clan to accept the Imperial Palace and Divine Prefecture and submit to its rule. Given this condition, they could no longer ally with Futian. If the alliance with Futian were to continue, they would lose protection from the Imperial Palace. As for the Ziwei Segmentum, it was left by Ziwei the Gria and was never intended as a principality that belonged to the Divine Prefecture. Likewise, the Heavenly Mandate Academy consisted mostly of relationships developed by Futian. Therefore, Princess Donghuang allowed them to make their own choices. However, among the two forces outside of the Lost Clan, the will of Ziwei the Great had long resonated with Futian, and because of that, the Ziwei Segmentum would probably never escape his control. The Heavenly Mandate Academy was one with Futian for so long that it was simply impossible for it ever to betray him. We have been entrusted by Ziwei the Great to do his bidding. The Palace Lord, once obtained the inheritance of Ziwei the Great, became the Palace Lord of the Ziwei Imperial Palace and took charge of the Ziwei Segmentum. This is the will of Ziwei the Great, and those who cultivate in the Ziwei Segmentum must heed it. We hope the princess will understand, Ren Huangchen explained. The Heavenly Mandate Academy was built by Futian single-handedly. Without Futian, the Heavenly Mandate Academy would not have been possible. I hope the princess will forgive us. Lord Taixian of the Heavenly Mandate Academy also spoke up. There was no doubt that they were willing to stand by Futian. We were never part of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. We ended up there only after being threatened by Futian to submit. Now, we are willing to serve the princess, said a dissenting voice. It was none other than the college chief of the former Tianqian Academy, Jin Ao. That's right, we were forced by Futian to be part of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, and now we are willing to serve the princess, said another voice. All those remnant forces from the 9 realms that had surrendered to the Heavenly Mandate Academy now seized their chance to rebel. The current situation was turbulent, to say the least. Following Princess Donghuang and serving the Imperial Palace directly was the way to survive in these troubled times. Futian had now offended the Imperial Palace in the Divine Prefecture beyond repair. His own safety was in jeopardy, and he would have to watch his back at all times. They were no fools, so they knew how to choose. Shameless beasts, Sky River Great Elder rebuked coldly. Instead of killing them back then, their lives had been spared, and they were given a chance to surrender. They never expected them to change their tune so quickly and decisively now. But Futian, who was still above the sky, didn't feel quite that way. Betrayal was commonplace for these people, and he didn't really care. Emperor Yi Qing was once his greatest secret. Now that it had been revealed, it was fortunate for him to be able to survive the revelation of such news. He had been worried about a day like this for a very long time and didn't know what outcome to expect. The situation at the moment was far better than what he had ever imagined. This was supposed to be a catastrophe. Very good. Princess Donghuang nodded and continued, after you return, report to the empty Imperial Palace. Yes, Princess. Everyone bowed and nodded, greatly overjoyed in their hearts. It was a stroke of good luck to be rid of Futian and follow the Imperial Palace. The teacher and my father are old acquaintances. For the sake of the teacher, I will no longer pursue the matters from today. Princess Donghuang looked at Futian, who was high above the sky. She then turned around and looked into the distance as she continued. From this day forward, Futian is no longer under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Palace in the Divine Prefecture. All your grievances are yours to resolve independently. In addition, the teacher has already made his stance known today. Since my father has decided not to interfere with his affairs, the teacher will no longer interfere with ours in the future. The words of Princess Donghuang couldn't be more clear to those cultivators from the various forces of the Divine Prefecture. Those who had been enemies with Futian snickered in their hearts and understood the significance of the princess's words. This was no less than a declaration of open season on Futian. What she meant was that the teacher from Four Corner Village could no longer stop them. It seemed that the princess was pretty upset about what has transpired today. After all, Yi Futian openly resisted the imperial order and defied her. In addition, as the only daughter of Donghuang the Great, and with Yi Futian being the successor of Emperor Yi Qing, the two of them were destined to be enemies, fateful opponents. Therefore, it was completely reasonable for Princess Donghuang to harbor some grudges toward Yi Futian. The cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy did not look so good. From now on, the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture would have no more worries about the future. Now, without the Lost Clan, Yi Futian's strength would be greatly reduced. Once he left the Ziwei segmentum, he might be hunted by the forces from the Divine Prefecture. Yi Futian was still in control of the Ziwei cultivation court, as well as the inheritance of several great emperors. Now, there was Emperor Yi Qing on top of everything else, so there was no telling how many others would covet what was in Yi Futian's possession. Let's go. After having said that, Princess Donghuang gave the order to leave. The cultivators from the Imperial Palace of Divine Prefecture left with her just as suddenly as she had spoken. People from other top principalities in the Divine Prefecture left with her as well. Without Princess Donghuang here, none of them dared to dawdle any longer in the Ziwei segmentum. After all, this was the territory controlled by Yi Futian, and in it, even those who had survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path couldn't best him. If Yi Futian wished to hurt them, it could be very bad for them. With shining rays of light, cultivators from all sides withdrew. Soon, those who cultivated in the Divine Prefecture disappeared altogether. Cultivators from the human realm left along with them as well. However, the cultivators from the Dark World and the empty Divine Realm were still there. At this time, the leader of the Dark World looked at Yi Futian and said, "Although there were some grievances between Renhuang Yi and us, if Renhuang Yi is willing to enter the Dark Court to cultivate, we will not take any action. Instead, we will protect Renhuang Yi from the persecution of the Divine Prefecture. The empty Divine Realm welcomes you as well." The cultivators from two major worlds were not just actively recruiting Yi Futian, but were offering to put aside the many grievances that had appeared between them over the years. This was in spite of the fact that Yi Futian had killed many cultivators of the Dark World. He was the successor of Emperor Yi Qing. He was tremendously talented, and he had a great emperor standing behind him to boot. He was way too valuable of an asset. The point was that Yi Futian and the Imperial Palace in the Divine Prefecture were now on opposing sides. And because of Emperor Yi Qing, they would be mortal enemies with no possibility of reconciliation. If Yi Futian could be groomed as a weapon to be used against the Divine Prefecture one day, why pass up such a great opportunity? Future prospects aside, even Yi Futian now was already apprised with the strength he possessed and the power he controlled. Yi Futian glanced briefly at the cultivators from these two major worlds. Obviously, he understood their intentions quite well, so he responded without hesitation. "Both of you have spoken up for me today. If something unforeseen happens in the future, I will remember what occurred today." Clearly, this was a soft letdown. "In that case, we will be leaving now." They didn't say anything more. They would be watching how Yi Futian planned to engage with the principalities from the Divine Prefecture. Chapter 2404, Abandoned. After the various forces left, Yi Futian descended from the starry sky. The sky was reconstructed, and the starry dimension disappeared. Myriads of stars disappeared from the sight of the crowd along with the silhouette of Ziwei the Great. Yi Futian landed in Ziwei Imperial Palace. Yushang came up behind him. The cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace and the Heavenly Mandate Academy all gathered around him. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief now that this ordeal had come to an end. However, they still couldn't put their worries to rest completely since danger was still lurking. Right now, they were besieged on all sides. They had even offended the Imperial Palace of the Divine Prefecture. The forces from the Divine Prefecture would no longer have any scruple about attacking Yi Futian and his allies. The former might even join forces to attack them. Of course, their prerequisite was that Yi Futian and his group left the Ziwei segmentum. After all, if they chose to attack Yi Futian in the Ziwei segmentum, they had to be prepared to face annihilation. A gentle breeze blew past, and everyone felt a bit chilly. The cultivators stared at Yi Futian silently. Their journey from now on would most likely be arduous. The various worlds were in chaos, and they were trapped here with a slim chance of breaking out of this predicament in a short time. "We will temporarily abandon the Heavenly Mandate Academy," announced Futian. Immediately, all the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy were overwhelmed with sorrow. They had formed deep bonds with the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Unfortunately, they were forced to abandon it now. Futian instructed, "Lord Taishian, please make a trip to the Heavenly Mandate Academy and make arrangements for the cultivators who are still in the lower worlds to come to the Z-Way segmentum. Then, please destroy the teleportation Grand Matrix." Lord Taishian nodded. He was aware that in doing so, they would completely sever the connection between the Heavenly Mandate Academy and the Z-Way segmentum, abandoning their base at the Heavenly Mandate Academy. All these years, Futian had contributed a lot to the Heavenly Mandate realm and the original realm. He had even been crowned the ruler of the original realm. However, the continual arrival of various forces in the original realm messed up the situation. This recent ordeal further complicated things. Everything had changed. Futian was kicked out of the game. He was but an outsider now. He had to desert his base at the Heavenly Mandate realm and leave the original realm temporarily. Nobody here questioned Futian's motive in doing so. All of them were aware that he was forced to make such a decision. The current Heavenly Mandate Academy was a dangerous place to be in. If they chose to remain in the lower worlds, they would be attacked at any moment. They would naturally not leave behind the teleportation Grand Matrix for their enemies to use. After the rest of their members from the Academy arrived, they had to destroy the Matrix. Lord Taishian swiftly led others to carry out the plan. Futian said, "Right now, the original realm has undergone major changes. Cultivators from various worlds had come to the realm. However, all these things do not concern us now. In the coming years, we can only stay and cultivate in the Z-Way segmentum. Fortunately, there is the Starry Cultivation Court which was left by Z-Way the Great. It is very beneficial for our cultivation. I'll meditate in the Starry Cultivation Court for a period of time. At the same time, I'll help everyone here with your cultivation too." Prior to this, he had quite a few allies from the Divine Prefecture. However, after today's incident, they had left him. After all the forces in the Divine Prefecture were under the command of the Donghuang Imperial Palace. Who would dare go against the Donghuang Imperial Palace and support him? Futian himself also did not wish for his friends to do so. If they did so, they would be dragged into this murky mess. "For you, increasing your cultivation plane is indeed the most important matter now," said Emperor Nan. Futian was currently a 7th-tier Runhuang. If he cultivated to the 9th tier and relied on the power of the starry sky in battle, even cultivators of Feng Ru's level would not be able to withstand his attacks. Even if he did not do so, once he cultivated to the peak of the Renhuang Plain and relied on the sacred remains of Shunjia, the great emperor, and the divine Guqin of Shenin the Great, Futian would also certainly be able to unleash even more terrifying might. When the time came, he would no longer be restricted wherever he went. At least when he was against some super powerful cultivators, he would have more power to defend himself. However, the matters of the outside world did not concern them now. "Do you want to cultivate in the devil world?" Yusheng asked Futian. If Futian went to the devil world, he would not be restricted by others. Futian shook his head. Over transmitted thoughts, he said to Yusheng, "Only we know what happened back then. Now, our identities are unclear. The devil world might have accepted you because your identity is special. However, it is different for me. No matter what I do, I will need to be more cautious." Yusheng did not say anything. He understood that what Futian said was correct. Only the two of them knew what had happened back then. Futian was never considered an heir of Emperor Yiqing. Yusheng's father had been the one who raised Futian. However, he did not teach Futian any cultivation techniques. He only said that Futian was born an emperor. As for Yusheng, he would become Futian's support. Hence, Futian's identity was definitely not what the outside world imagined it to be. It was not as simple as him being the heir of Emperor Yiqing. Besides that, the way the Devil Emperor treated Yusheng, as well as the fact that the Devil Emperor was unwilling to tell Yusheng his identity, made him suspicious about his own origins. Futian continued advising Yusheng, "Yusheng, although I am restricted now, You are from the devil world so that no one will dare touch you. You can still train in the outside world. The original realm has undergone a huge change, and there are various fateful encounters out there. You can venture out and explore with the various cultivators from the devil world to see whether you can claim some fateful encounters for yourself. Yusheng nodded his head slightly. A cold look flashed past in his eyes as he said, I will investigate those who spread the rumors. Yusheng clearly wanted to get back at them. They had ulterior motives for intentionally spreading rumors claiming Yi Futian was related to Emperor Yi Qing. They wanted Yi Futian dead. For now, don't get into large-scale conflicts with the forces of the Divine Prefecture. Both of us need to keep a low profile. When we are sufficiently powerful in the future, we will not need to worry about being unable to seek revenge, said Yi Futian. Yusheng was somewhat unsatisfied, but he still nodded his head. However, he thought to himself that if he encountered the members of the Divine Prefecture when he was searching for fateful encounters outside, he would not show them mercy. Yi Futian glanced around at the other cultivators and said, I am sorry to have troubled all of you with this. Palace Lord, we have been cultivating in the Ziwei segmentum all this while. Now, you have opened up the cultivation court of Ziwei the Great for us. How can this be considered trouble? Said Renhuang Chon. Xiao Dingtian from the Xiao clan said, The Heavenly Mandate Academy originally rose to prominence because of you. If it weren't for you, whether or not we would be able to survive until today in this chaotic world would be up for debate. How can this be considered trouble? The Ziwei segmentum is much larger than the 9 realms. It's pretty nice to cultivate here. Others also spoke up. Although their current situation was frustrating, recalling everything that had happened, they knew that Yi Futian had already done good enough as he led them forward. It is good to cultivate in seclusion for some time. We can improve our abilities, added Emperor Nan. They would most likely need to cultivate for quite some time. For the foreseeable future, they would not be leaving this place. Donghuang the Great promised to not meddle in your affairs. Once you overcome the divine tribulation, nothing will be able to stop you from going wherever you want, said Fangai. He seemed to be comforting Yi Futian. I understand, said Yi Futian as he nodded his head. He glanced over the familiar faces around him. He felt a sense of warmth well up inside him. He still had so many friends standing beside him and supporting him. He had no right to be decadent and slack. In the heavenly mandate realm of the original realm, news of the war in the Ziwei segmentum spread. Lord Taixian led all of the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy away and then destroyed the teleportation Grand Matrix. After that, the cultivators from various forces descended upon the Heavenly Mandate realm and occupied the ruins of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. They also began to conquer the Heavenly Mandate City. All the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate realm felt a sense of sadness over this incident. Had the figure of their faith left the Heavenly Mandate realm just like that? He had actually been dealt with by the Imperial Palace. An era had ended. The era of Yi Futian was ended by the Imperial Palace. No one knew what the fate of the Heavenly Mandate realm would be. Now, the cultivators here were at the mercy of the other forces. There would most likely be no one like Yi Futian, whose core tenet was to protect the Heavenly Mandate realm. At the moment, around the ruins of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, many cultivators had gathered. They were from all corners of the Heavenly Mandate realm. An old man had brought along a youth. When the old man saw the scene before him, he sighed. Grandfather, has something happened to Renhuang Yi? Then, who will protect the Heavenly Mandate realm in the future? The youth asked as he looked at the ruins. No, Renhuang Yi has only left temporarily. He will return in the future, replied the old man. However, how many years would it be before the hope of the Heavenly Mandate realm returned? Chapter 2405, Seclusion. All the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy had migrated to the Ziwei segmentum. Yi Futian ordered them to build a new Heavenly Mandate Academy in Ziwei Imperial, the main city of the Ziwei segmentum. This allowed the disciples of the academy, who followed him all the way here, to have a place for meditation. This would hopefully make up for their loss. At the same time, the core members of the academy could enter Ziwei Imperial Palace freely. Besides that, they were allowed to use the palace, and even the starry cultivation court, for cultivation. Everything proceeded in an orderly manner. After Yi Futian had decided to go into seclusion, he planned to sever the Ziwei segmentum from the original realm. For the next few years, they would quietly cultivate here and stop caring about the matters outside. However, several days later, Yusheng still brought them some news. It was related to the forces involved in spreading the rumors back then. The ancient god clan from the divine prefecture was not involved. Instead, the forces involved were the top forces from the divine prefecture. On top of that, the Xin clan, Nanhai family, the Shangqing domain chief's manor, and the Donghua domain chief's manor had participated too. After these forces learned of the news, they spread it around immediately, ensuring that Princess Donghuang got wind of it. Actually, Princess Donghuang had known about it beforehand. However, she was forced to meddle in the affair by coming to Ziwei Imperial Palace directly after the news had been spread around. Yi Futian did nothing after learning the truth, but he kept a list of the forces involved in his mind. The vendetta between the Shen clan and him stemmed from what happened between him and the Shun clan of the original realm in the past. His grudges with the Donghua domain chief's manor went without saying. However, he was surprised that the Shangqing domain chief's manor was involved in this too. Even though there was some friction between them, Yi Futian had not expected that the other party would want him dead. From the looks of it, there were indeed many people in the divine prefecture who wished for his death. The ones that he knew were only the forces that made their goal apparent. Many other enemies wanted to kill him. Yi Futian did not put much thought into this matter. Now that the ordeal was over, he did not have much to worry about since Hua Jieyu had returned to his side and he had met Yusheng. Yi Futian could fully concentrate on cultivating in peace. In the starry cultivation court of Ziwei Imperial Palace, there were many cultivators around. After Yi Futian entered the court, he raised his head and glanced at the endless stars in the sky. Hua Jieyu stood beside him quietly. She followed him here, and they prepared to cultivate together for a period of time. Jieyu, the teachings of the great emperor that you acquired are a little bizarre. During our seclusion this time, I want to work on other aspects aside from improving our cultivation planes. We can rely on each other's cultivation to deepen our understanding of the art of cultivating, Yi Futian said gently. There were no secrets between him and Hua Jieyu. The two of them would share what they had mastered separately so that they could improve together. Hua Jieyu nodded in agreement. I agree. However, this time, we might need to cultivate for a long time. I'm afraid that it will be quite boring, Yi Futian said while staring at her lovingly. We have been apart for decades. There was nothing more painful than our separation. With you by my side now, how could I possibly feel bored? Hua Jieyu replied softly. The two of them exchanged a glance and smiled. Then, their figures flashed, and they dashed towards the stars. A lot of people were staring at their silhouettes. Some were envious of their relationship, while some wished for their happiness. After going through countless challenges, the two could finally be with each other now. Even though we have just experienced a huge disaster, it might be a blessing in disguise. Fortune and misfortune are two sides of the same coin. After all, little brother got rid of one of his worries and can now focus on cultivating. He has Jieyu by his side now too. It can be said that his current situation is rather perfect. Zhuge Mingyue and Gu Donglu stood side by side in the sky as they looked at Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu. A glint of joy flashed in Zhuge Mingyue's eyes as she said this. Gu Donglu nodded and said, Jieyu has been little brother's concern for all these years. Now, he can finally rest his worry and cultivate quietly for a few years. Unfortunately, someone else has to suffer, Zhuge Mingyue sighed while smiling wryly. Gu Donglu looked towards a spot down below upon hearing her words. He saw a beautiful silhouette sitting and meditating there quietly. However, she looked somewhat lonely. In the starry sky above, Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu went to the highest spot. Then, they sat cross-legged in the high heavens while the rest of the cultivators were cultivating down below. Not long after, all the stars lit up. Endless starlight shone on Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu, causing them to glimmer. At the same time, the entire starry cultivation court grew even brighter. Endless starlight rained down, allowing the cultivators beneath to also sense the aura hidden in this place. They could particularly sense the powerful auras hidden in the imperial stars as they were showered in starlight. Lord Taishan, Sky River Great Elder, Emperor Nan, Old Ma, and many other cultivators looked at the two silhouettes in the starry sky. Yi Futian was the embodiment of all their hopes. The future of all the cultivators present here depended on him. Lord Taixian and the elders knew that they had little hope of turning the tide themselves. Aside from Yi Futian, most of his companions had also inherited the teachings of the great emperors. Yi Futian, along with Yu Shang, Hua Jieyu, and Gu Donglu, were the future of this starry world. However, they first needed some time. Yi Futian and the others began cultivating in seclusion in the starry cultivation court of Ziwei Imperial Palace. Meanwhile, in the original realm, storms were stirring up again. The cultivators of the various worlds were fighting over the fateful encounters that appeared. Regardless if they were relics in the heavenly mandate realm or those that appeared in the original realm, all of them were being fought over by the various cultivators. The cultivators from the divine prefecture, the dark world, the empty divine realm, the human realm, and the devil world were in constant friction with each other. Many small-scale conflicts erupted between them. However, they were still cautious towards one another. Therefore, no large-scale battles had occurred. However, the dark world and the empty divine realm were always ready to move. They wanted to attack the divine prefecture many times, yet the human realm seemed to lean towards siding with the divine prefecture. Hence, these two major worlds had yet to seize the opportunity to start a divine war. The original realm was still changing rapidly. This was also one of the reasons why the war had yet to erupt. The various forces wanted to pillage more relics to increase their power. For now, no one wanted to face each other head-on. Yet, as time passed and there were more and more conflicts between them, many cultivators ended up perishing. At the same time, the monstrous Renhuangs with exceptional talent were developing more rapidly than before. However, all this seemed unrelated to Yi Futian's group. After several years, in the starry cultivation court of Ziwei Imperial Palace, many cultivators were still cultivating inside. They did not involve themselves with matters of the outside world. They were considered the only top force within the original realm that had not participated in the conflict. Right then, many people looked up high in the sky. Up in the starry sky, many illusory figures appeared. They were all silhouettes of Yi Futian. They seemed to be everywhere, and each one was as real as the original. Buzz. Beams of sword light shot across and illuminated the starry sky. The various silhouettes stabbed out at the same time in tens of thousands of permutations. Yi Futian was obviously comprehending swordsmanship. Many people were watching from below as he practiced. Everyone seemed to have their own comprehension of what they saw. These past years, aside from comprehending the Great Path and increasing his cultivation plane, Yi Futian also trained in attack techniques. He cultivated a myriad of techniques, many of which were powerful divine techniques passed down from the great emperors. However, since they were not his own power, he could not unleash their full potential. Hence, he needed to rely on his own ability to comprehend the techniques again in order to better utilize them. He then had to merge them, using his powers of the Great Path to make them even stronger. These years, the cultivators in the starry cultivation court witnessed Yi Futian's growth. It was not just Yi Futian. The others were also improving. As the years passed, the outside world changed swiftly without cease. Only within the starry cultivation court did time seem to stop. 10 years felt like a day. Just like that, more than 10 years went by. It seemed to have passed like the snap of one's fingers. Chapter 2406, Traveling Far. It was the year 10080 on the Divine Prefecture calendar and the 80th year of cultivation for Yi Futian. That day, under the starry night sky, Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu were bathing under the starlight. Both of their auras were rich and strong. Their bodies shined magnificently, and divine light encircled them. Their planes had become deeper. Yi Futian had reached the 8th level Renhuang plane. Just one more level, and he would be at the peak of the Renhuang plane. As for Hua Jieyu, she had already reached the 9th plane after inheriting the Brahma's pure sky empress's cultivation and her millions of incarnations. In the ensuing years, she had been stabilizing her cultivation plane, only deepening it when she found the inheritance of a great emperor. Hua Jieyu had now truly reached peak 9th level and was entering a bottleneck. If she went up just one more step, she would encounter the three tribulations. Both of them stopped cultivating. As they watched the numerous figures cultivating under the starlight, all sorts of feelings and thoughts welled up in their hearts. More than 10 years. It's my first time cultivating for such a long time, Futian said softly. He'd never cultivated continuously for so long. But this time, he was forced to do so as he had to raise his power level. Dangers lurked everywhere out there, and many wanted him dead, forcing him to focus on strengthening his powers. Hua Jiu nodded lightly. It was her first time cultivating for so long as well. Being under this starry sky and bathing under the divine might of a great emperor helped with gaining deeper understandings, which made it very suitable for cultivation. It's already year 10080 of the divine prefecture calendar, and I'm reaching 100 years old soon. Time flies, Futian smiled as he spoke. Yeah, same for me. Hua Jiu smiled as well as she looked toward Futian. They had known each other when it was year 10,000 on the divine prefecture calendar. Back then, they were still teenagers. Now, they were almost 100 years old. It did make one feel a little sentimental. Of course, it was extremely rare to have someone reach such a level of cultivation under 100. Their cultivation levels are rising far faster than their age, which made them both look really young. Futian, with his fully white hair, still looked extraordinarily handsome, and his temperament alone would make him stand out in any crowd. He far surpassed his charm as a teenager. Hua Jiu still looked stunningly beautiful. It was as if she was a goddess of the 9 heavens. Futian Jiu, Zhuge Mingyue called out. Y'all haven't come down in a while. Beside her, Gu Donglio's aura was also starkly different from years ago. Not too long ago, he had reached 7th level Renhuang plane. Back then, he received an inheritance from the demon realm. Afterward, he received the inheritance of the imperial stars under this starry sky. While the opportunities he had encountered couldn't compare to Futian's, it far surpassed the vast majority of cultivators in this world. Really, there were really not many who had such chances. The cultivation levels of Xiao Muyu, Dozhao, Nanluotian, and others had also increased significantly. Of course, the one who had improved the fastest was Chen Yi, despite looking as if he never took anything seriously. There was a time when he was at a higher cultivation plane than Futian. Even now, he was still on the same level as Futian, reaching 8th level Renhuang plane. Since becoming acquainted with Futian in the Donghua domain, this guy always had a sense of mystery surrounding him. Today, even Futian felt that he couldn't see through Chen Yi entirely. Futian knew that Chen Yi was the same as himself and held some secrets, but he never asked. After all, who didn't have secrets? Chen Yi had saved his life before and treated him sincerely. To him, that was sufficient. It was indeed a long cultivation session. Futian smiled as he nodded. Futian, Old Ma, Blind Tai, and Lord Taixian all walked over, and the group gathered together. Chief Elder, what's happening outside now? Futian asked. Although he hadn't paid attention to the outside world for more than 10 years, Renhuang Qin regularly sought information from out there to be aware of the basic situation. It's chaotic out there, but many relics have surfaced. Many of the organizations had made great gains, including emperor-level inheritance. This turbulent era is the best and the worst at the same time, Renhuang Chan said. Futian nodded. Opportunities tend to appear in times of chaos. But, after so many years, many people had left the original realm and returned to where they came from, especially the top forces who had already obtained the relics of great emperors. They didn't dare to stay as they feared being targeted by everyone else, and they knew not to be greedy. As a result, the number of forces in the original realm has been gradually decreasing. Renhuang Chan continued, the conflicts between various worlds never stopped, but they also didn't launch an all-out war. Perhaps it isn't time yet. How about the Heavenly Mandate realm? How are they now? Futian asked. The situation at the Heavenly Mandate realm isn't looking good now, Renhuang Chan said nonchalantly. Futian had an idea what that meant, so he didn't ask more about it. Without the Heavenly Mandate Academy, of course the Heavenly Mandate realm wouldn't be doing well. Futian, what are your plans after this? Continue to cultivate and raise your power levels? Lord Taixian asked. Yi Futian had already reached the 8th level Renhuang Plain. Even amongst all Renhuang Plain cultivators, it would be hard to match him equally. But out there were many tribulation-level cultivators and even terrifyingly powerful individuals like Fengru. They were still a little lacking if they wanted to venture out there. Amongst them, there were no apex-level cultivators to protect Yi Futian. Nope, Yi Futian shook his head. After cultivating for so many years, I feel that I'm improving at a slower rate. It must be that I'm encountering a bottleneck. Jieyu had reached peak-level Renhuang Plain and needs an opportunity to break the shackles of the Renhuang Plain. So I would like to travel far. There were still too many dangers in the original realm so that they couldn't venture at ease. Yi Futian was actually planning to leave the original realm to travel. Travel far? The cultivators were a little startled. They asked, where? First, we'll visit the Divine Prefecture. I need to return to Four Corner Village for a bit. Afterward, perhaps we will travel to the Western world, Yi Futian answered. The Western world? A rather surprised expression appeared on the cultivators' faces. The Western world was unfamiliar to them, and all they knew was that Donghuang the Great once went there to cultivate. Why would Yi Futian want to go there? Behind the crowd, Hua Qingqing's pretty eyes showed surprise. Could it be because of her? Jieyu knew about her, so Yi Futian probably knew too, which was why he wanted to travel to the Western world. The Western world is the safest as well, relatively speaking, Yi Futian said. He had never had a conflict with the Western world before, and no one knew about his existence there. Of course, other than going out there to experience the world, it was partly because of Hua Qingqing. The cultivators nodded. Yi Futian does need to travel far this time. Master, I'll go too, Xiaomuyu said. And me. Do Zhao and the others spoke up as well. They all wanted to follow Yi Futian. We don't need this many people for the trip this time. It will make us a big target, and that will make the affair rather dangerous. You guys should focus on cultivating and raising your power level to reach the peak of the Renhuang Plain as soon as possible. Yi Futian rejected their request. He didn't plan on taking a lot of people with him. Uncle Tai and I shall follow you. We can look after you, Old Ma said. Uncle Tai would be good enough. With Hua Jieyu and my current cultivation level, it's actually already sufficient. Qingqing wants to follow us. That's why we would need some extra help, Yi Futian said. Old Ma didn't say more. Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu's levels were indeed stronger than anybody else's now. Then I'll follow you guys back to the village. I haven't seen Little Ling for so long, Old Ma said. Yeah, Little Ling, Feng Xiyuan, and the other kids. They are probably all grown up by now. With the master teaching them cultivation, they're probably all pretty strong now, Yi Futian smiled as he said. I'll go too. It was Chen Yi. Yi Futian looked toward him. Chen Yi's cultivation level was similar to his, so it wouldn't be a problem. Since we're traveling far, before heading to the Western world, could you accompany me somewhere first? Chen Yi asked Yi Futian. It was the first time he had spontaneously asked Yi Futian to go there. Sure. Yi Futian nodded without having too many queries. He asked, where do you want to go? Divine Prefecture, Great Bright Domain, Chen Yi answered. Great Bright Domain. A sense of astonishment appeared in Yi Futian's eyes. He turned toward Chen Yi and asked, you came from the Great Bright Domain? Chen Yi cultivated the way of light. Based on that, it was indeed possible that he had come from the Great Bright Domain. The Great Bright Domain was one of the 18 domains of the Divine Prefecture. However, this domain was unique in that it had an exceptionally glorious history. It was mysterious and ancient, but now, it was said to be the most decrepit domain in the Divine Prefecture. The Great Bright Domain had been ravaged by time to the point that it didn't even have a ruler-class organization. But looking into history, the Great Bright Domain was once the most glorious domain in the Divine Prefecture. Of course, back then, it wasn't even known as the Divine Prefecture. Instead, it was known as the Divine Bright Domain. Chen Yi wanted to go to the Great Bright Domain. Thank you. Chen Yi thanked Yi Futian. He appeared to be rather serious. Yi Futian immediately understood that this was likely one of Chen Yi's secrets. While he looked like he didn't take anything seriously, he was likely hiding dark secrets deep down. But why did he venture into the Donghua domain back then? When are you departing? Lord Taixian asked. In a few days. I'll visit my teachers and leave a clone of my consciousness before leaving. Would you please continue with your cultivation? There is no need to worry about me, Futian said. It wasn't a huge deal, so there was no need to be so solemn. After he had made proper arrangements, he would leave straight away. The cultivators nodded. Then Futian rose into the air and flew into the starry skies as a magnificent divine light erupted from him. Afterward, the stars shined as many of Futian's projections appeared. Amongst them was a projection of him sitting in a cross-legged stance under the starry sky. He looked tranquil. It was as if he were merging with the starry sky. All these years, no one came to disturb him because no one dared to do so. Futian was able to control the celestial stars of the skies and borrow the will of the great emperor in battle. He was basically invincible in this segmentum, so who would be so bold to come for him? But now that he was leaving, naturally, he had to make some preparations for the unpredictable. After all, he didn't know how many years this trip would take. This wasn't just traveling far in the conventional sense. He was crossing the entire world. Chapter 2407, 4 Youngsters. After Futian left the Z-Way segmentum, starlight encircled the entire segmentum. If one watched the segmentum from far away in the endless space, it would be as though the whole segmentum was shrouded in starlight. Years ago, the Z-Way segmentum was sealed inside a rock. When the seal was broken, it formed this segmentum. Before Futian left, he sealed the segmentum once again using Z-Way the Great's powers and left a clone of his consciousness inside the segmentum to control the power of the seals so it wouldn't get broken easily. Even if the seal were attacked, it would be as firm as a mountain. Only after he had done that did Futian leave, feeling at ease. It was as if the whole ordeal in the original realm was unrelated to him. At that moment, he stood outside of the whole thing. At the Shangqing domain, Four Corner Village had become a flourishing holy land in the area. Some say that inside the mysterious village of Four Corner City lived a great emperor, the master of Four Corner Village. When the rumor broke out, the entire Shangqing domain erupted, and its influence even spread to the divine prefecture. Countless cultivators came to seek their paths from the master and wanted to enter the village. In a tavern inside Four Corner City, many cultivators had appeared here. Atop the tavern building, 4 young cultivators were chatting around an elegant stone table. All 4 of them exuded extraordinary temperaments. Below them, several people were standing in respect. There were even several among them who were of higher cultivation levels than the 4. One of the 4 young cultivators with short hair spoke. "You can stop wasting time on us. Master won't be taking on any more students. However, since Four Corner Village had surfaced before the world, as long as you are willing to become a part of the village and focus on cultivation, you might be able to see the master someday if your performance stands out from the rest." After speaking, he released a deep sigh and sighed. Every year when they came out from the village, the same thing would happen. These people didn't want to follow the rules and become the village's external force, yet they wanted to meet the master to seek paths. How was that possible? "Third brother, there is no need to answer them," an extraordinarily handsome young man with long hair said. He picked up his glass and took a sip of wine. He was enjoying himself. The sarcasm in his gaze was clear as he looked toward those standing beside them. All of these people were desperate to seek results. Everyone knew what they were thinking, and he never bothered paying attention to them. "Yeah, all these years, masters only taught us. What gives them the right to be accepted?" The only girl among the 4 cultivators asked softly. She looked graceful and dazzling, and her aura was similarly extraordinary. Only the dark, short-haired young cultivator sat in silence. He seemed like a quiet person. "Who's that?" Just then, the long-haired young cultivator suddenly turned and looked into the distance. A golden divine light flashed past his eyes. The next moment, a figure appeared before the 4 of them. Instantly, all 4 of them stood up, which surprised all of the cultivators in the tavern. Who was this person? "It's Blind Tai," someone said softly. Blind Tai was really famous back in the day. Now, he had returned, and his aura was seriously powerful. "Dad!" the short-haired teen who was addressed as third brother exclaimed. He was the son of Blind Tai, Tai Tu. He was the little boy who had liked to follow Little Ling back then. The long-haired handsome youth was Fang Siyuan, and the only girl was Little Ling. The quiet, short-haired teen was the kid who was used to being forgotten in the village, Duo Yu. Now, they had all grown up. Uncle Tai, Fong Siyuan, and Little Ling revealed surprised expressions as they stood up. Only Duo Yu stood still in silence. "Come with me," Blind Tai said before he flew into the air. All four of the cultivators trailed behind him and flew toward the sky. Before long, they saw the four people waiting in front. The silver hair of the person in the middle fluttered in the wind. Excitement appeared on the faces of the four young cultivators. They accelerated and flew before Futian. Fong Siyuan and Little Ling rushed up and called out to him with big smiles on their faces. "Master, you're back?" "Master." Tai Tu scratched his head a little as a candid smile appeared on his face. Only Duo Yu didn't move. He stood where he was. He bowed toward Futian and greeted him, "Master." Futian had to take a second look before he could recognize the four of them. The kids were now all grown up. The four young cultivators were overjoyed to see him, but the way they expressed it was somewhat different. Perhaps it was because of their personalities. Fong Siyuan was probably the most lively and playful one. Futian knocked on Fong Siyuan's head and rubbed Little Ling's head. He then looked at Tai Tu, who had a smile that looked a little silly. All four of them seemed to have the same personality from when they were children. "Duo Yu, no need to be like this when you see me," Futian said when he saw that Duo Yu was still bowing. Duo Yu was the most pitiful kid among the four. As an orphan, he ate from the tables of all the families in the village, and no one had cared for him. "Yes, master." Duo Yu nodded before standing up straight and looking at Futian. There was a special light in his gaze as he looked at Futian. After all, his life had been changed by Futian. Although the two of them didn't spend that much time together, little Duo Yu, who grew up eating from other families' tables, only he knew what Futian appearing back then meant for him. "Fourth brother, no need to be so demure with master. Just act natural," Fong Siyuan said, laughing a little. Futian looked at him and said, "What's this? You guys ranked each other?" "Master, we're all your students. Of course we need to know who's the most senior and who's the most junior. I'm big brother, Little Ling is the second sister, Tai Tu is the third brother, and Duo Yu is the youngest, so he's the fourth brother," Fong Siyuan said. Futian looked at him and shook his head, though he felt warmth in his heart. This reminded him of his days cultivating in the cottage. He was the most junior back then, and all his older brothers and sisters in the cottage cared for him the most. "Master, who are these two goddesses?" Little Ling had been paying attention to Hua Jieyu and Hua Qingqing all along. Little Ling paid special attention to Hua Jieyu, who stood closely beside the master, which made her guess Hua Jieyu's identity, but she couldn't be sure. This was because back then, when Futian came to the village, it was with another person. "This is your masteress, and this is a friend of mine. Her name is Hua Qingqing," Futian said, smiling. Little Ling was startled for a moment before a sweet smile appeared on her face as she said, "It's Little Ling's pleasure to meet masteress. You're really pretty, just like a goddess. And Hua, you too. Since when did you start talking so sweetly?" Futian said. A gentle smile appeared on Hua Jieyu's face as she complimented. "Little Ling is pretty too." "Thank you, masteress," Little Ling replied, smiling sweetly. Student Fong Siyuan. "It's a pleasure to meet masteress." Student Tai Tu. "Pleasure to meet masteress." Student Duo Yu. "It is a pleasure to meet masteress." The other three also greeted Hua Jieyu. They were much more serious than when they saw Futian. "No need to be so serious. Just treat me like you would your master," Hua Jieyu said, smiling. She felt the respect that the youngsters had for Futian. "Masteress is right. There is no need to act so restrained," Futian said. "Let's go back to the village." "Yes." Everyone nodded before the group flew into the sky. Before long, they had returned to the four-corner village. The villagers were all thrilled to see Futian return. As they walked into the village, Little Ling asked, "Master, why didn't Grandpa come back?" "Grandpa felt at ease with Master taking care of you guys, so he wanted to stay there and work hard to raise his cultivation level in order to protect you in the future," Futian replied and then smiled. Little Ling curled her lips and said, "Master, I'm not a little girl anymore. I'm a Renhuang too now." A 30-year-old Renhuang, that was indeed outrageous. Yet all four of the young cultivators were Renhuangs, 100% authentic Renhuangs. However, their cultivation processes were unique. They were born with paths naturally, fostered by the Great Path, and taught from young by the Master. From infancy, their cultivation contained the natural will of the path, which greatly accelerated their pace of cultivation and allowed them to reach their current level today. There were no shortcuts to cultivation. However, there were indeed unique individuals in the world. From this, it could be seen what Muyun Shu from the Muyun family in Four Corner Village had missed. Back then, Muyun Shu was the leader of the kids in the village. After the incident, the master, who was once just a teacher for basic knowledge, started teaching cultivation to Little Ling and the other three. Master is truly a once-in-a-lifetime figure. Yi Futian sighed inside as the group reached the private school. Master. Yi Futian bowed slightly. Come in, said a voice from inside. The group walked inside to the courtyard. Master was sitting there quietly, and his gaze passed over Yi Futian, Hua Jieyu, Hua Qingqing, and Chan Yi. You're all not simple, he said softly. Yi Futian looked at Jieyu, Chen Yi, and Huang Qingqing, who was beside him. Not simple. Jieyu had the great emperor's inheritance on her. Hua Qingqing's origins were indeed not simple. Chunyi held some secrets as well. Did the master see through all of that? Do you have something to do, returning to the village this time? Master asked Yi Futian. Master, we came to say goodbye, and also to see the kids, Yi Futian said. We are planning to make a trip to the Western world. Before that, we're also going to the Great Bright Domain. That's good. Master nodded. Rather than being trapped in the original realm, it may be good to put everything down and experience the outside world far, far away. You've only been to a few places thus far, so the Western world is a pretty good choice. Master, we want to go too, Feng Xiyuan said. Yeah. Little Ling and Tai Tu nodded as well. Duo you also looked toward Yi Futian. It seemed that he was looking forward to it too. Yi Futian looked toward the four of them. Just as he was about to reject them, Master said, these four youngsters have already learned what they have to learn, yet they haven't gone outside Four Corner City before. It is indeed time for them to go outside. You should bring them along. The four were all Renhuang plain cultivators, yet they were all naive and simple. Their hearts were pure, and their personalities were as clean as blank pieces of paper. But it was precisely because of this that they had been able to move forward all this while and reach their current standing. Now, Master thought that it was time for them to head out. As Yi Futian heard Master say so, he hesitated, then nodded and said, all right. The four were all Renhuang plain cultivators. They would be considered powerful cultivators outside, so he didn't need to worry much about that. Not to mention, Blind Tai would be there too, so he could take care of them as well. It wouldn't be a bad idea to bring them out and experience the world. Chapter 2408. Chun Yi's Secret. The Divine Prefecture was boundless and vast and held in infinite numbers of continental plates. The Great Bright Domain was the highest domain inside the Divine Prefecture other than the Imperial City. Located on the east side of the Divine Prefecture, it was a domain that was somewhat peculiar among all 18 domains. Because of its history, the Great Bright Domain was shrouded in mystery and was a destination to explore for many cultivators. Furthermore, compared to other domains in the Divine Prefecture, today's Great Bright Domain had the smallest footprint as a majority of its territory had been divvied up by the other surrounding domains. It was no longer part of the existing Great Bright Domain. Some even claimed that the Great Bright Domain should have never existed. Therefore, so many years later, the so-called Great Bright Realm, in fact, was only a single continent. This one remaining continent was what the world referred to as the Great Bright Realm today, which was also called the Great Bright City. A domain was a city. Naturally, this city was vast and had a mystical allure. According to legend, the Great Bright City was actually the Bright Temple, and the entire city was the grounds of the Bright Temple. This was the reason that so many years later, the Great Bright City was shrouded in light and seemed to contain the power of light. However, the light was everywhere. Many people had been exposed to the light since the day they were born. It was precisely because it was everywhere that it was more difficult to capture and comprehend. In addition to being born with this kind of ability, The vast majority of the cultivators in the world were unable to perceive the great path of light, let alone comprehend it. Qian Yi was the only expert in the method of light that Yi Futian had ever seen all these years. In the Divine Prefecture, the vast majority of those who cultivated the method of light were in the Great Bright City. This was the most suitable place for cultivating the power of light, but it was also the least suitable place for anyone who cultivated and comprehended other great paths. At this time, in the void outside the Great Bright Domain, a group of people was traveling through the void between the clouds and the mists. There were 9 people altogether in this group. Under them was a flying boat flashing with golden light. It contained a mighty spatial power of the Great Path. It took them shuttling through the space constantly, moving through the clouds and mist. These 9 were none other than Yi Futian and his entourage. Yi Futian, Hua Jieyu, Hua Qingqing, Qian Yi, Blind Tai, and 4 other youngsters, including Fang Siyuan. Almost there. At this time, on the flying boat, Qian Yi spoke up while still looking into the distance. He had always been somewhat of a jokester. He appeared sober and serious right now as he watched the brilliant light that was falling from the sky far away. No wonder it's called the Great Bright Field, Yi Futian whispered. The light came down from the firmament, and it was visible to the naked eye. It was something extremely magical. It was enough to distinguish that continent from other areas. It seemed as if it was an independent world of its own. No one had any idea what kind of force was capable of causing such a vision. Are you from here? Yi Futian asked Qian Yi, who was next to him. Chun nodded. I grew up here when I was a child. The light falling from the sky can make one perceive the power of light much more clearly. I have been able to perceive the existence of light since I was a child, and this type of light was nurturing to my body. That explains the illumining body of the great path you possessed. Yi Futian looked at Qian Yi and continued, So, who are you? Obviously, Qian Yi was more than he appeared. Who am I? Qian Yi smiled, a little self-deprecating. That blind man said that I was born to be extraordinary, but I never felt anything close to it myself. For many years, I have been accustomed to being alone by myself. I'm nothing special. Qian Yi's statement revealed a lot to Yi Futian. It seemed that Qian Yi was someone with a story. Then, why did you go to the Donghuang domain? Yi Futian asked out of curiosity. The Great Bright Domain was actually quite a ways away from the Donghuang domain. Qian Yi had gone over there in the early phases of becoming a Runhuang for unknown reasons. Because someone asked me to go, Qian Yi smiled and said, watching the area where bright lights were sprinkling down. Yi Futian didn't quite understand what he meant. Did someone ask him to go? Who was it that had asked Qian Yi to go to the Donghuang domain? It didn't seem that he had achieved any major feats in the Donghuang domain. Instead, he ended up escaping with him later and came along all this way. But Qian Yi didn't seem to want to continue discussing this topic. He was still looking into the distance when he suddenly asked, Do you believe in fate? Yi Futian looked pensive when he heard Qian Yi's question. Fate? Why would Qian Yi ask him that? To a certain extent. Yi Futian nodded and continued. When I was a teenager, I knew an astrologer who was able to glimpse into the future. I don't. Not really, Qian Yi said. His eyes moved away and redirected on Yi Futian. He smiled, however, even if I don't much believe it, I still want to try it. I don't understand, Yi Futian said. He didn't really understand what Qian Yi meant by that. Perhaps you will later, Qian Yi smiled and said. As for now, I can't tell you. Yi Futian looked slightly puzzled. He felt that today Qian Yi seemed to be speaking in riddles. His words were not transparent at all. What kind of secret was Qian Yi hiding? What was it that he wanted to say? The flying boat was still moving forward, shuttling through the void. Although they could see the place of light from afar, they were, in fact, still quite a distance away from there. The light scattered upon the world, covering the great bright domain, rendering it much brighter than they ever imagined possible. Therefore, even though they could see it, they were actually still very far away. After a while, the flying boat broke through the clouds and mist and finally came to the great bright domain. In the void, there was no mist or clouds, only the light that shone from the infinite source. Yi Futian stretched out his hand, and he could see the light shining on his hand with his naked eyes. This world was much brighter than any place he had ever been. When the light was shining on his body, he could feel something miraculous. Probably it was exactly as Chenny had described. Someone could only be born with this kind of light power. Where are we going? Yi Futian asked Chen Yi. This great bright domain used to be just a city, but it was, in fact, the territory of the Bright Temple. In this city, it was rumored that the ruins of the Bright Temple are there, and that's where we are heading. Chunyi said, keep going. I will give you directions. Do the ruins of the Bright Temple really exist? Yi Futian said with some doubt. If so, how many people came here over the years to try to find the ruins of the Bright Temple? Are you asking me? Chunyi shrugged and said, but you are right. Over the years, there have been many people who came in search of its ruins. Even the domain chief's manor guarding the Great Bright Domain was built close to the ruins for obvious reasons. However, no one has ever succeeded in finding the ruins, so who knows whether it exists or not. Then, why did you ask me to come here with you? Yi Futian asked, and this question seemed to touch the heart of the matter at hand. Chunyi looked at him and smiled, because somebody believes in it. Chapter 2409, Blindchen. To the east of the Great Bright City, there was the Land of the Ruins. This area was fairly large, and people often came to explore it. At the far end of the ruins, there was a door. From the other side of the door, it was clear that some light seemed to be coming through the cracks, illuminating the ruins. This door was rather interesting. It was transparent in nature, but behind the door, there seemed to be more ruins. It was as if a small world existed beyond this door. Some had walked through that door before, but many who had walked through that door were blinded by the light inside. Some also tried to destroy the door, but found they were unable to do so. Some of these people who tried were incredibly powerful, but all to no avail. Perhaps, because of the peculiarity of this door, many were convinced that these ruins were once the site of the Bright Temple. According to the legends, this door was called the Portal of Light. It had been said that all those in the temple must walk through it to experience the baptism of the light before they could become a part of the Bright Temple. Around the site of these ruins, many cultivators were gathering. However, in the many years that had gone by, these ruins had been explored over and over again, searched every which way possible. Any treasures that had once existed, no doubt, had long disappeared many, many years ago. If it weren't for that door, no one would even entertain the notion that this was the site of the Bright Temple. Even so, in the Great Bright City, fewer and fewer people believed in it. On the contrary, this seemed to affirm the beliefs in a few very powerful principalities, and it was them that had been guarding and waiting in the surrounding area of the ruins. There was only this one city inside the Great Bright Domain, and the top forces in the Great Bright City spread out from the site of the ruins around the general area. It could be said that these dilapidated ruins were the absolute center of the Great Bright City. At this time, on the remains of these ruins were several young men and women with extraordinary temperaments standing there, looking at the portal of light. Does this door really lead to the light? A woman whispered. Her body was surrounded by a halo of great path brilliance, indicating that she was in existence in the Renhuang realm. Who knows? But that's what the elders have always said, so it must be true, the young man next to her replied solemnly. Perhaps they were wrong. The woman shook her head. In the past few years, the original realm has changed drastically, attracting cultivators from all over the world. Countless from the 18 domains of the Divine Prefecture have gone to the original realm. There are even rumors that the changes between heaven and earth started in the original realm. Only the Great Bright City seems to have been isolated from everyone else in the Divine Prefecture. What's the point of guarding these ruins just because of something that the blind man said? Unless, of course, because the elders really believe that one day the Bright Temple will reappear here again? At least the blind man from Qin's garden believes in it deeply, a slightly older cultivator next to them added. He appeared to be around 30 years or so, and there was a divine aurora hidden within his eyes. Can blind Qin's words be trusted? The woman looked dumbfounded. Everyone in the Great Bright City has always said that blind Qin is blind, but can see the light. Just what is so special about him that so many people believe in what he said? As a blind man, can he really see the light? Maybe. At least for these many years, No one in the great bright city has ever touched blind Chun, and they all hold a certain respect for him. I do not know why, but those able cultivators must have their reasons. The person next to her joined in. A look of disdain flashed through the woman's eyes, and there was some arrogance on her face. The original realm is the center of impending changes between heaven and earth, but the elders don't care one bit. Just a word from Blind Chun, and the entire great bright city will be destroyed by the ruins. The woman's tone was mocking. She glanced at the portal of light ahead and said, "Since the elders won't, I will ask Blind Chen myself whether his words are true or not." The people then looked at her, and they could see a hint of pride on her face. They all knew that the woman had wanted to go to the original realm when she heard that many top figures of the world had embarked on a journey there. These cultivators of the 18 domains in the Divine Prefecture and other cultivators from other worlds had uncovered many relics in the land of the original realm, all of which were events that she greatly desired to witness. But because of something Blind Chin said 20 years ago, the entire great bright city fell into a state of suspense, and no one dared to leave. Everybody stayed to guard and watch the ruins. No one ever questioned his words. But today, she wanted to ask him, how could a blind man see the light? Don't be hasty. The person next to her exhorted. If they can, the elders must have done it a long time ago. Everyone in the great bright domain believes in it, so there must be a reason. So the light will descend, and the divine relic will reappear? The woman smiled sarcastically with a degree of contempt. Something Blind Chin said 20 years ago was why the cultivators of the great bright domain waited for over 2 decades, including her own family. Because of it, they had missed the grand occasion at the original realm. At this time, in the void not far away was a flying boat, floating there silently, not disturbing anybody. Futian and the others stood on top of the flying boat and glanced at the ruins ahead. He then put away the flying boat implement. These must be the ruins of the great bright temple that Chani was speaking of, he decided silently. He didn't expect that the place would be so broken that only a single door was left intact. However, this door seemed a little interesting as light was emitted from behind it, suggesting that there was a world hidden behind the door. Futian glanced at the woman speaking before them, then looked at Chan Yi next to him. But Chan Yi was expressionless. It was as if he hadn't heard anything the woman was saying. Futian remembered that on their way over, Chan Yi had mentioned that a blind man once told him that he was meant to be extraordinary. He wondered if the blind man named Chun that the woman was referring to was just a coincidence, or if the blind man they talked about were one and the same. 20 years ago? Futian thought. It was some 20 years ago when Chen Yi met him in the Donghua domain. That blind man is the same as he was before, fond of speaking nonsense, Chen Yi said in a low voice with a cold expression in his eyes. He seemed to be full of contempt for the blind man he referred to. As if they had heard what he said, those few people in the front turned to look at them. They could feel that Futian and his party were unusual. The woman smiled and said, "You too think that blind man was an imposter?" Chun-Yi looked at the woman and asked, "Who are you?" "Lin Shi of the Lin family," the woman said. "The Lin family?" Chun glanced at the woman with indifference in his eyes and said, "I can chastise that blind man, but who the heck are you?" "You!" The woman's expression altered slightly as coldness shot out from her eyes. Futian was also caught by surprise. It seemed that what Chun said was different from what he thought. Chapter 24:10. The blind man welcomes a guest. When Chun-Yi was talking about the blind man, he did not seem to mind. However, when he heard other people hurling insults at the blind man, his attitude immediately changed. It was clear that he still respected Blind Chen very much. Futian was curious about the identity of Blind Chen and what his relationship with Chen-Yi was. Lin Shi from Lin Clan glanced over at Chen-Yi. There was a cold look in her eyes. She walked towards where Chen-Yi was. The youths beside her also looked towards Futian's group. They had not seen these people before. They probably weren't cultivators from the top forces of Great Bright City. There was only one city in the Great Bright Domain. The strongest forces were all in this region. This was different from other domains. The members of the local forces had seen each other before and could recognize each other at a glance. However, they did not recognize any of these people. "Who are you?" asked Lin Shi as she gave Chun-Yi an indifferent look. Chun-Yi swept a cold and arrogant glance at her and replied, "You are not worthy of knowing." The expression of the group of cultivators of the Lin clan changed slightly. Although these people had yet to unleash their auras, and they could not sense their overall cultivation levels, this group of cultivators had extraordinary temperaments. They should be very powerful. Otherwise, the members of the Lin clan would have already attacked Yi Futian's group. Even so, their Lin clan was still a top force of Great Bright City. This person was putting on airs and looked down on other people. Wasn't he being too presumptuous? A slightly older youth from the Lin clan flicked the hair on his forehead. The aura of the Great Path flowed around his body. He was actually a 6th-tier middle-level Runhuang. His aura was astonishing. The domineering aura permeated the space as it swept towards Yi Futian and his group. He said, "In Great Bright City, no one is too mighty to be known by the cultivators of the Lin clan." After he said this, a powerful aura of the Great Path burst forth from his body. Invisible sword will circulated in the space, causing a killing intent to loom over the surroundings. The formless sword will was everywhere. Yi Futian and his group could sense it clearly. With such a short distance between the two parties, the cultivator could launch an attack at them with a mere thought. "You better not attack," warned Chun-Yi as he cast a glance at the youth. He still had not unleashed his aura of the Great Path. Arrogance flashed in his eyes, as though he was looking down on that cultivator of the Lin clan. It seemed like he did not take the other party seriously. Chun-Yi's attitude caused the pressure of the aura of the Great Path unleashed by the cultivator of the Lin clan to increase. The formless sword will howled impatiently as though it would erupt at any second. His gaze was dead fixed on Chun-Yi as his palm extended forward slightly. He wanted to attack, but he was a little fearful of Chun-Yi's overbearing confidence. The space appeared exceptionally suppressive at the moment. A few other cultivators of the Lin clan also unleashed their wills. They stared at the group before them intently. Even though Chun-Yi had not said much, his demeanor was presumptuous. He clearly did not take the Lin clan seriously. Chun-Yi was not the only reason the youth was holding himself back from attacking. The gaze of the white-haired youth beside Chun-Yi was too calm. This calmness originated from unwavering confidence. There was also the blind man who stood behind them. He was merely standing there quietly, but his presence alone was enough to suppress the others. This group of people was most likely a powerful foreign troop. Since the group refused to unleash their auras of the Great Path, the youth had no way of figuring them out. Buzz. Right at this moment, a beam of light shot up to the sky somewhere in the distance. The light was actually more brilliant than any other lights in the heavens and the earth. It was akin to a light that could illuminate heaven itself. This scene caused the cultivators who had gathered here to reveal surprised expressions. All of them looked in that direction. "It's from Old Street," someone mumbled. "That's where Blindchen lives," another person whispered. What was going on? Soon, another beam of light shot towards where they had come from. It was like a bridge made of light that extended all the way here from Old Street. The light shone on the ground. Aside from where they were, there seemed to be similar lights shining on other locations. At this moment, in Great Bright City, many cultivators from the large clans raised their heads and looked in the direction where the lights were shining. They expanded their wills and soon figured out the source of these beams of light. The blind man was welcoming a guest. Somewhere, a middle-aged cultivator commanded with a deep and rich voice, "Go and find out who is the guest that Blindchen is welcoming." One by one, cultivators rose into the sky from various locations in Great Bright City. They were all rushing towards the same destination. Over at the ruins, Chun-Yi looked in the direction where the light came from and mumbled, "It's Blindchen." After he said this, he ignored the cultivators from the Lin clan and left immediately. He moved towards where the light came from by traversing across the sky. Yi Futian and his group naturally followed after Chun-Yi. The cultivators from the Lin clan watched them leave and still did not attack. "Our clan members will most likely head over there too. Let's go and check it out," the leader of their group said. Lin Shi's gaze was cold as he continued to stare in the direction where Yi Futian and his group had gone. Old Street of Great Bright City was a narrow alley. An old mansion stood there. It appeared somewhat shabby, but it was still quite clean and tidy. A rather famous figure in Great Bright City resided in this mansion. He was Blindchen. Some people crowned him Chan the Diviner. Chan the Diviner had never revealed his cultivation in front of anyone. No one knew his cultivation plan. He was just like any other ordinary, old, blind man. However, rumor has it that he had been living for many years. This set him apart from other people. The mighty figures in Great Bright City respected Blind Chen because his appearance remained the same throughout the years. He looked exactly the same now as he did when those mighty figures were still in their youths. Rumor has it that Blind Chen was a mighty astrologer. He could read fortunes and pry into the past and the future. However, this rumor had yet to be verified. No one could tell for sure whether or not it was true. It was because Blind Chen had never read anyone's fortune before. Throughout the years, many people sought him for fortune-telling, but he refused to even meet them. Some people claimed that he did not dare to reveal God's design for fear of dying early. Yet, more than 20 years ago, Blind Chen once said that light would descend upon them. The divine relic would appear once again. The people of Great Bright City treated Blind Chen's words as a prophecy. Since then, various major clans and forces stationed in the city had never left this place before. Even when the original realm went through huge changes and the cultivators in the Divine Prefecture were called to assemble, they chose to remain here. They were all waiting for the prophecy to be fulfilled. They had waited for more than 20 years. Some people asked Blind Chen about the prophecy before, but he didn't respond to them. After so many years, more and more people were suspicious about the validity of the prophecy. One of them was Lin Shi from the Lin clan. She did not believe in Blind Chen at all. In her opinion, he had deceived the crowd with a lie, causing them to miss out on an opportunity. She believed that opportunities awaited in the original realm. However, fortune and misfortune were two sides of the same coin. How many people had actually managed to obtain fateful encounters in the original realm? The seniors in Great Bright City most likely had their own considerations too. However, after more than 2 decades, the old mansion inhabited by Blind Chen finally showed signs of activity again. Currently, a beam of light shot up to the clouds from inside the old mansion. The door of the mansion was wide open. Beams of light radiated outward as though they were paving paths of light. Cultivators from all corners of the city arrived at the mansion by following the light trails. Was the prophecy he proclaimed more than 2 decades ago true or false? Chapter 24:11. An honorable guest? Cultivators gradually gathered in front of the old mansion. These cultivators all had extraordinary temperaments and were disciples from large clans. The Great Bright Domain was called the Divine Bright Domain in the past. It had passed its heyday and had now become one of the weaker domains among the 18 domains of the Divine Prefecture. Moreover, the domain only consisted of one city. However, due to its glorious past, there were still quite a number of powerful forces residing in the current Great Bright Domain. The blind man has opened his doors, commented someone. At Old Street, many people stared at the light that was still radiating outwards from within the wide-open doors. Their hearts trembled. Throughout the years, the doors were shut most of the time. Now, the doors were open. Who was the guest that Blind Chen was about to receive? Was this related to the prophecy that he proclaimed 20 years ago? In the sky above Old Street, many silhouettes appeared. Their gazes landed on the old mansion too. These cultivators who had just arrived were people from different factions. They each occupied a spot in the sky. Futian and his group arrived as well. They stood in the sky above Old Street as they observed the mansion. Futian cast a glance at Chan Yi, who was beside him. Judging from Chen Yi's response, he was most likely acquainted with Blind Chen. Moreover, their relationship was special. Was the beam of light that shot out from this mansion related to Chan Yi? As expected, Chen Yi looked towards the inside of the mansion with a conflicted look. He said with a low voice, "Blind man, I'm back. Is this your home?" Futian asked softly. Chen Yi revealed a puzzled expression. Home? Did he have one? Who knows? Chen Yi had been calling him Blind Man since he was young. However, he was indeed raised by Blind Chen. "I'll go in and take a look first," Chen Yi said to Futian and the rest. "Go ahead," Futian said while nodding. He was aware that Chen Yi had a special relationship with the owner of this mansion. Alone, Chen Yi walked forward and entered the doors. Immediately, countless gazes landed on him. The crowd revealed strange expressions. Someone asked right away, "Who is he?" The various cultivators revealed puzzled looks. They were not sure. They had not seen this person before. Chunyi entered the old mansion. Nothing happened after he entered. This caused the crowd to reveal even more bizarre expressions. Blind Chin actually allowed people to enter the mansion just like that? Many years ago, Blind Chin once took in a youth. The youth was dressed in rags and was filthy. However, Blind Chin still took good care of him. Do you all still remember this? Just then, a middle-aged man said this as he stood in the sky. A few elderly cultivators nodded and said, "That's right." Back then, there was also a rumor that someone saw light coming from the body of the filthy youth. That's right. In different locations, one by one, people began recalling that there had been such a youth before. Someone claimed, "I saw it with my own eyes before. I still remember that when I saw the light on his body back then, I was astonished. After that, I never saw him again. He seemed to have been hidden away by Blind Chin." Down below, the group from the Lin clan also arrived. Lin Shi personally saw Chunyi enter the mansion. She immediately understood why Chunyi had such a huge reaction just now. So, he actually already knew Blind Chin and was raised by him. From the looks of it, the youth was Chunyi without a doubt. Lin Shi lifted her head and looked in one direction. She discovered that the cultivators of the Lin clan had also arrived. Her group took to the sky and walked over to where the ladder was. She then informed the seniors in a low voice about what had transpired before their arrival. "Father, does the clan actually believe that Blind Chun can see the light and predict the future?" asked Lin Shi incredulously. Her father shook his head and answered, "No one knows. However, there is indeed more to Blind Chen than meets the eye. He has lived in Great Bright City for many years. When I was young, Blind Chin was already as he is now, and he is still around today. Cultivators do have very long lifespans. What's so strange about that?" asked Lin Shi. "Once one reaches the Runhuang Plain, they will live as long as the heavens and the earth." "Maybe," the middle-aged man replied indifferently. Lin Shi lowered her head and glanced down below. She then said, "All the cultivators in the Great Bright Domain have wasted more than 20 years because of what he said. Until now, we are still waiting. I don't understand." When the middle-aged man heard what she said, he looked at the old mansion with a cold and indifferent gaze. What she said was true. After more than 20 years, where were the light and the divine relic? "Today, we need to get a straight answer from Blind Chun," he said in a low voice. "What's the matter? Lin Kong, do you not trust the old diviner?" Another middle-aged man said loudly as he looked at Lin Shi's father. This person was dressed in a long, blue robe. He was tall and had exceptional cultivation. He simply stood there and gave off the airs of an authoritative figure. This person was the current family head of the Lan family, a top force of Great Bright City. He had powerful cultivation and was a Runhuang at his peak. It is not that I do not trust him. It is just that, after more than 20 years, the old diviner should give us an explanation, replied Lin Kong in a deep voice. "You can ask the old diviner personally later," the Lan family head answered with a smile. In another location, there stood a group of cultivators. They were adorned in long robes as red as flames. The mark of a red maple leaf was also carved on their bodies. Faint scorching currents of heat could be seen emanating from their figures. The leader of this group was a cultivator who appeared rather young. He was extraordinarily handsome, and his face was chiseled and well-defined. Although scorching heat currents were emanating from his body, he gave off a cold and arrogant air. He was Yu Ho from the Yu family. He was the cultivator with the most outstanding talent in the family. Aside from the sun flare, he also comprehended the method of light. Although he was just an 8th-tier Renhuang for now, the family head of the Yu family, who was Yu Ho's father, had already begun to let him handle family matters. In another location, there stood a group of cultivators dressed in white robes. Their temperaments were outstanding, giving off an otherworldly vibe. This group of people was not from a major family. They were from a sect, the only sect in Great Bright City. 7 Stars Mansion was established by a prominent figure many years ago. The chief of 7 Stars Mansion had unfathomable cultivation and rarely made an appearance in public. Even today, the 7 Stars Mansion chief was not here. His 7 disciples had come instead. They were the 7-star lords of 7 Stars Mansion. Each of them had very powerful cultivation. Their leader was currently the most exceptional cultivator in the sect, the head of the 7-star lords, 7 Night Star Lord. Lin clan, Lon family, Yu family, and 7 Stars Mansion were currently the 4 strongest forces in Great Bright City. Of course, aside from them, several other forces had arrived. They were spread out across the region. However, they did not stand out as much as these 4 major forces. Since the old diviner has opened his doors to welcome a guest today, he will naturally solve the riddle that he left behind 20 years ago, said 7 Night Star Lord. The rest cast a glance at him and ignored his words. They continued to stare at the old mansion intently. Today, Blind Chun welcomed a guest by showering the entire Great Bright City with light. All of them wanted to know who exactly Blind Chun was waiting to receive. Just as the crowd was discussing the matter, 2 figures emerged from the old mansion. The surroundings fell silent immediately. Everyone had their gazes on the entrance. Then, they saw 2 people emerging from the doors. One of them was Chan Yi, who had entered the mansion just now. The other person was blind and wore ragged clothes. He held a crutch in his right hand. He appeared no different than an ordinary, disabled old man. The crowd could not sense any aura from him. He was in his twilight years and looked like he would pass away at any moment. His long, white hair appeared somewhat unkempt. Besides that, he kept a long white beard. He looked as though he had not tidied his hair for years. With his appearance, he looked nothing like an erudite master. However, despite his shabby appearance, his body was squeaky clean. There was not even a single speck of dust on his ragged clothes. He was sloppy but not dirty. Greetings, old diviner. The heads of the Lin clan and Lon family were more polite. Even though they were standing in midair, they bowed slightly in the direction where Blind Chen appeared. However, Yu Ho and the 7-star lords from 7 Stars Mansion were not so courteous. Yu Ho stood there unbudgingly and said, "The old master has finally come out from seclusion. How can I not come out? There's an honorable guest arriving today." Blind Chun took a few steps forward with the help of his crutch before he finally said something. Even though his voice was not loud, everyone around could hear him clearly. "Is he related to the prophecy that you proclaimed 20 years ago?" asked Lin Kong, the head of the Lin clan. "Yes," replied Blind Chen. He actually admitted it right away. This caused the surrounding cultivators to turn serious. The guest was actually related to the prophecy. Furthermore, this was the first time Blind Chun validated any information related to the prophecy. From the looks of it, with the arrival of this extraordinary figure, the ruins of the Bright Temple might reveal itself once again. "Who is this honorable guest that you are referring to?" Lin Kong further inquired. Blind Chen held onto his crutch and continued to move forward in a certain direction. Everyone was observing where he was heading. Yi Futian still stood at his spot silently. When he saw Blind Chen moving towards him, he couldn't help but reveal an astonished expression. Was he the honorable guest that Blind Chen mentioned? Even though Yi Futian had just arrived here along with Chan Yi, based on the intel that he briefly gathered, Blind Chen was not an ordinary old man. Even the top Renhuangs here crowned Blind Chen as Chun the Diviner. A person like him had no reason to welcome Chen Yi's friend with such fanfare. Blind Chun even caused such a huge commotion with his exceptional hospitality. Moreover, Blind Chun mentioned that this guest was related to the prophecy. It was precisely because of this that Yi Futian felt somewhat strange. Something was off. Had Blind Chun been waiting for him? The things that Chun Yi said to him before this were also rather baffling. Why did he feel like his encounter with Chun Yi back then was not just a coincidence? Chapter 24:12, Catastrophe of Death. Blind Chun walked to Yi Futian. He was leaning on a cane. Although he was blind, he seemed to be able to see him somehow. When he was facing Yi Futian, Blind Chun put his hands together to greet him and said, "The blind man welcomes you, my young friend." Yi Futian hurriedly returned the courtesy and responded, "You are too kind, sir." He didn't ask him why he was getting special treatment, as everyone's eyes were on them at this moment. It was neither the time nor place to ask any questions. At this time, all the cultivators around them were looking at them, or rather, they were concentrating on Yi Futian. In the crowd, some of the older folks had lived for many years. Blind Chun had appeared the same for many years now. Moreover, Blind Chun was cold to everyone. Nobody had ever seen him give anyone this kind of treatment, welcoming someone personally. Now, an outsider had made Blind Chun step out of that old house and bow to greet him. Who was this white-haired young man? Furthermore, Blind Chun claimed that this had something to do with the prophecy. Could it be that this cultivator was the key to opening the relic of light? This man seemed to have come back with Chun-Yi. Was it because Blind Chun had already foreseen it, so he had asked Chun-Yi to find him? At this moment, everyone was full of curiosity about Futian. My young friend, you have come from afar. Please come to my humble abode to rest a while, Blind Chun said to Futian in a polite and friendly tone. Obviously, Futian could not possibly refuse such a gesture, so he nodded and said, I would be more than happy to oblige. Blind Chun nodded. Then, almost as if he were making an announcement to those far away, he said, Since there are distinguished guests here today, I don't have much time to entertain everyone so that I won't keep you any longer. Please feel free to return to your homes at your convenience. With that said, he led the way with the help of the cane and walked in the direction of the old house. Chun-Yi followed him but turned back to take a glance at Futian. At this time, Futian was still full of questions. However, he followed behind Blind Chun, figuring that he could ask questions later. Nonetheless, the many cultivators that had gathered around frowned. So, was he hoping to dismiss them just like that? Today, cultivators from all major principalities had come with a purpose. Now, with the emergence of a mysterious young man who may have something to do with the relic of light, they felt they must get to the bottom of the matter. At this moment, a ray of light came down, carrying a fiery current with it. It was Yu-Ho. This unexpected presence stopped Blind Chun and the others dead in their tracks. When they looked to the sky above, they saw Yu-Ho looking cold and arrogant as he looked down and said, Who is this man, and what does he have to do with the ruins at the Temple of Light? How are we to interpret the prophecy? It is a rare occasion that drew all the cultivators from the great bright city here today. It is a perfect time for our questions to be answered. Yes, everyone is here today, so why don't you say a few words to let us know what is going on? And who is this young man in white? Lin Kong, the head of the Lin family, added. How could they leave without some explanation from the blind man? You will understand in the future. There's no rush, Blind Chun said lightly. After a brief pause, he continued moving forward without any intention of stopping. He did not intend to explain anything to anyone else. Watching him walking towards the old house, everyone around him frowned, displeasure in their eyes. When the light appeared today, the blind man came out to greet the guests but didn't even bother to speak to them before sending them on their way. At this time, a figure in the void descended from the sky, followed that beam of light, and landed above the old house. She simply stood there, watching Blind Chun and the others. Lin Shi, don't be rude, in the void, the clan leader of the Lin family chastised her. However, next to Lin Shi, a few more people were descending as well. It was the same group of people that had quarreled with Chun-Yi and the others at the site of the ruins. However, the cultivators who descended later did not bother to stop Lin Shi but hovered and watched her. Obviously, they had some ideas of their own. These later generations of Ren Huang were egotistical individuals who held themselves in high regard. They had never understood the tolerance the elders exhibited to a blind man. Today, they wanted to find out why, no matter the cost. Even though Lin Kong had chided them on the surface, he didn't order anyone to stop them. Obviously, he also had the thought of pushing the matter further. Blind Chun had overstepped his boundaries. For more than 20 years, he had never given them an explanation. Elder is well known by all, and I heard that the Elder can predict the events of past and future, as well as prophesizing and predicting events not yet known. May I ask the Elder to predict my future today, so I see for myself? Lin Shi asked while looking at Blind Chun. Her words were respectful enough, but her tone was not all that kind. There was even a sharp sword flowing upon her, as if it might break out of her body at any moment and attack Blind Chun. Blind Chun raised his head slightly and faced in Lin Shi's direction. Chun-Yi took a step forward and said coldly, Get back? Good. But at this moment, Blind Chun spat out something that puzzled Chun-Yi to no end. He turned back to look at the blind man. Good? What did that mean? She was taken aback as well. She looked at Blind Chin, not understanding at all what this word meant. I predict that you will have a catastrophe today, pronounced Blind Chin. As soon as his voice faded, the surrounding space suddenly quieted. There seemed to be some hidden meanings in what he said. She stared at Blind Chin as well. His eyes sharpened more than before. A cold voice came out, saying, I don't believe it. I know you don't believe it. It's precisely because you don't believe it that there is this catastrophe. Blind Chin continued in a calm voice and said, Go back now, and you might escape it. If you continue to persist, I am afraid there is no running away from this catastrophe. What catastrophe? She took a step forward as the sword while flowing in the direction of Blind Chin shrouded him. Catastrophe of death. Blind Chin's response was simple. Catastrophe of death? Was this a prophecy or a threat? Even the aura of those from the Lin family in the void suddenly chilled. Lin Kong, the clan leader of the Lin family, whose eyes contained that sword will of his, now directed towards Blind Chin who was below. Catastrophe of death? Hearing these words, anger emerged in his heart. You exaggerate, Lin Kong said coldly. Suddenly, several cultivators from the Lin family stepped down and appeared all around Lin Shi, as if they understood the meaning of the words spoken by their clan leader. Although Blind Chin couldn't see clearly, his perception seemed to have seen everything. There was a self-deprecating smile on his face as he said, Indeed, fate cannot be avoided after all. All the surrounding cultivators displayed a curious look. If Lin Shi died, would that count as a prophecy? Would it be the words of Blind Chin that lead to her death, or the prophecy itself? However, the cultivators from the Lin family didn't seem to believe it. A powerful aura came down, and the quiet space was becoming slightly suffocating. She continued to move forward towards Blind Chin. However, from Blind Chin's perspective, this was fate. Chapter 24:13. The Coming of Catastrophe. Blind Chin did not move. He stood there, still leaning on the cane in his hand. Chunyi didn't move either. He merely raised his head to look at Lin Shi, who had taken a few steps forward, stopping right on the edge of the old house. Close behind her in the sky above were cultivators from the Lin family, who were extraordinarily talented. Futian and the others stopped as well as they directed their attention forward. In this suppressed space, the sword will seem to escape into the invisible, hovering above Blind Chin and the others. Everyone's attention was on Blind Chin and Lin Shi. They wondered if she would actually do something. If Lin Shi were to make a move, what would be the outcome? No one knew if the outcome predicted by Blind Chin was technically a prophecy or not. Lin Kong was watching as well. Up until this moment, he hadn't stopped Lin Shi. However, the aura of the Great Path permeated from his body as his divine consciousness covered this area. He believed he could take action in a single moment. For cultivators at their level, this space was far too narrow, and they could easily cover it in a single thought, attacking from any direction, ultimately razing this entire area to the ground. Then try it, Lin Shi spat. His voice still held an incredible sense of cold arrogance. The moment her voice fell, an invisible sword will directed towards Blind Chin. This invisible sword will seem to meander in the void, which could not be detected by the naked eye. Nevertheless, the existence of the sword will was real enough. Finally, Lin Shi made her move. She was no longer able to resist the temptation of giving it a shot. Even though the man in front of her was the mysterious Blind Chin, she still had her disbelief. Today, she wanted to find out, once and for all, if this blind man had been deceiving everyone all along. But the moment she acted, She saw a ray of light. The light was extremely dazzling. It bloomed right next to Blind Chin, stinging everyone's eyes. At this moment, she could not open her eyes, so she closed them tightly. She felt the whole world had turned into a world of light, which submerged everything in this space. She could not see anything except the light. Time seemed to slow down at this moment, and She suddenly felt the breath of death. In this instant, countless thoughts burst into her mind, and there was shouting. "Get back," the voice said. She heard it, but there was no time to react at all. In Shi's world, there was only the light. The light occupied her entire world and swallowed up everything, including her body and her spiritual soul. At this moment, she realized that she had lost. After all, Blind Chen's prophecy had been fulfilled. Lin Shi's body disintegrated under the light, turning into countless dots of light in an instant. It was as if she had never existed. Not only were the cultivators behind her unable to save her in time, but they simply had no way of saving her either. In that instant, the light also invaded their worlds and occupied everything. When they could finally see the world outside clearly, Lin Shi's body had already turned into numerous spots of light, dissipating in front of their eyes. A figure appeared where Lin Shi was. It was Lin Kong. He stretched out his hand, trying to grasp something, but that spot of light evaporated in his palm, escaping his grasp. He had thought that he would be able to respond no matter what happened. But what had happened was so ruthless. No matter how fast the reaction, it could never be faster than the power of light. Under the light, Lin Shi was wiped out as if she had always been dust and smoke. How could he have stopped it? At such a close range, the light was shining upon them in an instant, and he was too slow. All he could do was watching his descendant disappear right before his eyes. As a matter of fact, just as Blind Chen had prophesied, it was the catastrophe of death, the power of light. The hearts of all the cultivators trembled. They all looked at the man who released the light. It was not the blind man but the young man next to him. This young man's appearance was not the most outstanding, but at this moment, there was a light shining upon his body. It was extremely dazzling. Chen Yi, the young man raised by Blind Chen many years ago, had now returned. He had the body of light, and his cultivation was tyrannical. This was the aura of a Ren Huang in the 8th realm, which was just a step away from the peak of Ren Huang. Those cultivators from the Lin family who had clashed him in the ruins felt extremely apprehensive at the moment. Had they engaged with him in a fight then, they probably would have perished already. But at this moment, he had killed Lin Shi. Does the clan leader of the Lin family believe in the prophecy I foretold? Blind Chen said as Lin Kong turned to look at him. Prophecy? Did he consider this a prophecy? Of course it was. He predicted events that had not yet happened, but the young man next to him determined whether this prediction would become a reality. In fact, Lin Shi and the cultivators from the Lin family had always had a choice. Lin Kong could have stopped Lin Shi in time, or Lin Shi could have left instead of making her move. Then, would his prediction have failed? But there were no ifs now. The fact remained that his prediction had come true and Lin Shi was dead. Lin Kong stared at Chen Yi, holding back the grief and anger in his heart. At this moment, he could still maintain his sanity without taking direct action, demonstrating his tremendous self-control. The elder's reputation is well-deserved. Even your disciple is outstanding. A Ren Huang of the 8th realm at such young age, said Lin Kong. Not only did he not retaliate, but he kept his composure enough to give a compliment. Of course, the reason why he didn't retaliate was because of fear. A young man taught by Blind Chen had become a Ren Huang in the 8th realm. So, what about Blind Chen himself? Was he really just a crippled old man? What if Blind Chen's cultivation was higher than his? If he made a move, the outcome would probably be no different than Lin Shi's, so he dared not act recklessly. He is not my disciple, Blind Chen replied. Whether or not he is a disciple of yours, he must have gotten this power of light from you, elder, Lin Kong probed, tentatively. What are you doing, continuing to step on my roof? Blind Chen did not answer him but commented lightly. Lin Kong was silent. He looked in front and saw Blind Chen walking towards the old house with a cane, working his way towards him. The aura of the great path from Lin Kong enveloped this space, which was extremely oppressive, to say the least. However, Blind Chen seemed to have not perceived it, still moving forward slowly, approaching the old house with each step. In the meantime, Chen Yi's attention was focused solely on Lin Kong, who was above the old house. As for the cultivators who were here, besides being shocked by Chen Yi's strength, they were more curious about the identity of Yi Futian and those in his party. Chen Yi was raised by an old blind man, and he had returned to the great bright city many years later with spectacular strength. But who were Yi Futian and the others? Yi Futian and the others were the only distinguished guests who had compelled the old blind man to come out of that old house of his and welcome them in person. Were they invited by Chen Yi? If so, what realm was their cultivation level? And how were they related to the Temple of Light? These were all burning questions to them, but Blind Chun probably wouldn't give them any answers like they wanted. The light was still on Chan Yi, shooting out in the direction where Lin Kong was. Lin Kong could make his move in a single turning of the mind, and Chan Yi could do the same. In such a short distance, once the battle broke out, no one could predict what would happen. Previously, Lin Shi insisted on doing what she wanted to do, and it had killed her. As for Lin Kong, the clan leader of the Lin family, what would he do? In the area around the old house, everyone's eyes were fastened on Lin Kong. If he did not back off, what would happen? The sounds of the cane hitting the floor could be heard loud and clear. Blind Chun was getting closer to the old house. Lin Kong's focus was always ahead. Finally, he said, "Let's go." When his voice faded, Lin Kong levitated into the sky, taking the cultivators of the Lin family away through the air. After they left, Blind Chen stepped into the old house, and the door closed. Yi Futian and the others disappeared. But no one left, as they were still standing quietly in the distance. Lin Shi was killed, and Lin Kong, the head of the Lin family, would not drop the matter so readily. Perhaps Lin Kong was getting reinforcements and would be back soon. People in the great bright city knew that among the 4 top principalities, the clan leaders of the 3 families were not necessarily the strongest characters. Within the families was also the existence of old monster-level figures who were the actual support these families relied upon. The matter this time probably wouldn't be resolved so easily. Chapter 24:14. The person behind the scene. Yi Futian followed Blind Chen to the old house, which was simple, clean, and quite spacious. Blind Chen pointed at a chair with his cane and said to Yi Futian, "Sit down, young friend." "Sir, you first, please." Yi Futian gestured with his hand as the group took their seats in order. Yi Futian was full of questions at the moment as he glanced at Chan Yi. Chan Yi was standing silently behind Blind Chen. He was obviously very reverent towards the blind man. "Sir, there are some things that I don't understand," Yi Futian started. "My friend, you don't need to say anything more, I know." Blind Chen nodded slightly, and Yi Futian did not pursue further, waiting for Blind Chen to continue. "I've invited you here because I have a favor to ask you, my young friend," Blind Chen said to Yi Futian. "What favor?" Yi Futian asked. "To help me open the relic of light left by the Temple of Light," said Blind Chen. Yi Futian couldn't suppress his surprise, so he asked, "Sir, I just got here for the first time and didn't know anything about the existence of the relic of light. Even if it really exists, why do you think that I can open it?" When Blind Chen heard this, he just smiled. The inheritances from Ziwei the Great, Shinin the Great, and Shunjia the Great Emperor. Are there any relics in this world that my little friend cannot open? My friend has no reason to be so humble. How do you know? Yi Futian looked doubtful as he glanced at Chan Yi. However, Chan Yi shook his head. "I didn't say anything." Yi Futian was more puzzled than ever. Blind Chen must have been in the Great Bright Domain all this time. If so, how could he possibly know what took place in the original realm? According to what he heard from those outsiders, Blind Chen had never even walked out of this house very often and rarely communicated with the others. How could he know what happened in the original realm? "How do I know is not as important. What is important is that I have been waiting for you, my young friend, for more than 20 years. Blind Chen's words confused Yi Futian even more. He had been waiting for him for more than 2 decades. "Are you a prophet, sir?" Yi Futian asked. This seemed to be the only possibility. Could it be that Blind Chen was really capable of predicting the future as rumored? "Not prophet so much. It's just because I can't see with my eyes that I perceive things more clearly than others and could see some things that ordinary people can't," Blind Chen continued. But Yi Futian couldn't really understand that either. "As for why I waited for you, my friend, it was not because I predicted anything, but because someone had asked me once to wait for you. However, when I saw you, I was more certain than ever that you, my friend, are indeed the one I have been waiting for," Blind Chen said. "Who?" Yi Futian asked. All this seemed to have become even more mysterious. Someone had asked Blind Chen to wait for him? And it was more than 20 years ago. Who could it be? He didn't want to say, so I dare not disclose it. As long as you know that this is the case, that is sufficient for now. I believe that you will know who it is in the future, Blind Chin explained. Yi Futian understood that Blind Chin wouldn't say anything more at this point. The accurate word he used was not that he didn't want to, but that he dared not to. Blind Chin was a mysterious and unpredictable figure, also known as Chan the Diviner. All four top principalities in the Great Bright City were a little apprehensive of him. However, he himself was convinced of a prophecy that someone else had told him more than 2 decades ago, and he dared not reveal that person's identity. Therefore, the identity of this other person was very intriguing. Just who was it that had exercised such great power over him? And what did it have to do with him? Could this involve the secret of his own birth? How do I unlock the secrets of the Temple of Light? Asked Yi Futian. Previously, you went to the Portal of Light, and that is where the Temple of Light lies today, Blind Chin continued. What will happen after it's unlocked? Yi Futian asked again. Chun-Yi will inherit the power of the light, Blind Chin said. Chun-Yi. Yi Futian looked at Chin-Yi next to Blind Chin and saw Blind Chin nod. He continued, you must be familiar with Chun-Yi's abilities. As you know, he was born under the light, with the power of light flowing in his body, and he is destined to be the heir of the light. However, he needs your help now. Yi Futian was more curious than ever as he glanced at Blind Chin and Chun-Yi. He asked, I have a question that I hope the elder can answer. Please go ahead, little friend. Blind Chun responded amicably enough. Did Chen-Yi and I meet by chance or by careful arrangement? Yi Futian asked. Since he had been asked to help Chen-Yi, he felt he had the right to know everything. When Blind Chan heard Yi Futian's question, the expression on his face became somber. Chun-Yi, too, was regarding Yi Futian with some seriousness. Obviously, no one wanted to be used. Before, Yi Futian had always thought their encounter was chance, and he had cherished it as such, treating him as a good friend. But if all this turned out to be a carefully arranged event, it would instill suspicion in his heart, as no one would be happy Abel being used as a tool by another. It was not a coincidence. Before Blind Chen had a chance to answer, Chen-Yi already responded. Let me explain. Blind Chen interrupted Chun-Yi and explained to Yi Futian. This still has something to do with the person I mentioned before. I can tell you that this matter was not arranged by me but orchestrated by someone else. As for Chen-Yi, he doesn't really know much of anything. He was just following what I told him to do. As for the person behind the scenes, although I can't tell you who he is, I swear to you that he would never do anything to hurt you. How can you be so sure? Yi Futian asked. If he wanted you to die, it's easy enough for him to do, so there is no need to spend so much energy to set it up. Blind Chin gave him an irrefutable reason. Someone that he was afraid of, someone whom even Chan the Diviner believed in must be some incredibly strong existence. And if such an existence had been keeping tabs on his every move in the dark, it must indeed be very easy to kill him if that were the goal. Ultimately, both parties had foreseen that he would come here. Very well. Yi Futian had a suspicion in his heart, so he didn't say anything more but simply agreed. Chun-Yi was a friend of his and had saved him once. Since there were no other intentions, he had no reason to refuse. Thank you, my friend. Blind Chun got up and bowed to Yi Futian slightly, saying, after Chun-Yi inherits the light, he will accompany you and assist you. I believe he can be a great help to you, my little friend. You are overly courteous, kind sir. Chun-Yi and I are friends already, so there is no need to say those things. Yi Futian also got up and helped Blind Chun to sit down again. However, he knew very clearly now that someone had arranged all of this. He didn't expect that what seemed to be a coincidental encounter at the Donghua banquet in the Donghua domain was not a coincidence. After all, Chen-Yi had been there because of him. In light of this new perspective, some of the things that happened later made a lot of sense now. But he still had one more question. What was Chun-Yi's background, and what was his relationship with Blind Chen? Why would Blind Chen think that he would be the heir of the light? Chapter 24:15, Piety. Outside of the old mansion, the various cultivators all remained there. No one left. Their wills enveloped the old mansion. However, after the doors closed, a faint light enveloped the old mansion and cut off their wills, preventing them from spying on everything that was happening inside. Naturally, no one tried to forcefully break through this barrier. They all waited outside patiently. As expected, Not long after, a powerful aura spread out. In an instant, a group of cultivators descended. They were cultivators from the Lin clan. Their leader was an elder who appeared extremely authoritative and sharp. There were two other elders beside him who also had terrifying auras. They were all old monsters of the Lin clan and seniors of Lin Kong, the clan head of the Lin clan, Patriarch Lin. When they saw the authoritative elder in the lead, many people in different locations greeted him with a bow. They clearly recognized the other party. This elder was the patriarch and the mastermind behind the scenes of the Lin clan. Patriarch Lin glanced around him. He then looked towards the old mansion. A terrifying aura emanated from his figure and enveloped the space. All the cultivators present could sense a majestic pressure and an extremely sharp will acting on them. All around the mansion, many cultivators felt an extreme pressure suffocating them. Blind Shen, isn't this too much? Asked Patriarch Lin in a loud voice. His voice contained a menacing wave of sound. It caused sound ripples to form in the air. Even the old mansion trembled and seemed as though it was about to collapse. These past few years, Patriarch Lin had been cultivating in seclusion, attempting to break through to the next plane. If it weren't for the events of today, Lin Kong would not have disturbed him. With a loud bang, the doors of the old mansion were immediately shattered. The light shroud that cut off the wills of the cultivators naturally also disappeared without a trace. The crowd looked inside past the doors. Then, a group of people emerged. Blind Chun still held on to his crutch. He looked at Patriarch Lin, who stood in midair, and said, I have warned your junior before. Since Lin clan hasn't been able to discipline your junior, she will naturally have to pay the price for what she has done. Lin clan has been rather courteous with you all these years, have we not? Patriarch Lin's voice was cold as his might enveloped everyone present. Futian frowned when a terrifying aura pressed down on him and the others. The aura belonged to someone who was at a level higher than Renhuang. The cultivation plane of Patriarch Lin had exceeded the Renhuang plane. He was someone who had survived the first stage of the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Even though the Great Bright Domain was a weak domain, there were still many forces located here. The leading four major forces were all based in this region, forming a cluster of strong cultivators. The strongest existences were all cultivators who had survived the first stage of the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Of course, some mysterious cultivators could occasionally be spotted in the Great Bright Domain. They were foreign cultivators who came here to pry into the relic of the Bright Temple. However, all of them had found nothing, and they would soon leave the place. Only the cultivators of the four major forces stayed here permanently. Blind Shen did not respond to Patriarch Lin's question. Instead, he took a few steps forward and announced, Haven't all of you been wanting to verify the prophecy? Now, let us go to the portal of light. The eyes of the cultivators narrowed when they heard his words. A brilliant light flashed in their eyes. Did Blind Shen mean that the ruins of the Bright Temple would appear once again today? Many people couldn't help but take another look at Futian. Blind Shen had been waiting for Futian's arrival, and he welcomed him with light today. Now that Futian was here, they were going to the portal of light immediately. What did this mean? Even Patriarch Lin was stunned. The might he unleashed actually lessened. Clearly, the relic of the Bright Temple was far more important to him than the life of a junior. No one showed signs of attacking anymore. When they saw Blind Chun striding forward, they followed him and moved towards the portal of light. The gazes of the cultivators of the Lin clan were as cold as ice when they stared at Blind Chen's back. However, since Patriarch Lin did not do anything, they suppressed their killing intent and followed behind him closely. Not long after, a group of people arrived at where the portal of light was. People would still occasionally come to this ruin. Many cultivators were observing this portal of light. They wanted to comprehend its mysteries. However, no one dared to enter inside. After all, in the past, all those who entered the portal of light ended up with tragic fates. Chun the Diviner has arrived. Many people recognized Blind Chun when they saw him. In Great Bright City, Blind Chun was still very famous. Rumor has it that his eyes were blinded after he entered the portal of light. They could not withstand the power of light in the portal. This caused him to lose his eyesight permanently. Now, why had Blind Chun brought the cultivators of Great Bright City here? Were they going to enter the portal of light again? Blind Chen's figure landed in the ruins. Chen Yi, Futian, and the others also landed. Behind them, the figures of the cultivators of the various forces remained floating in midair. They were waiting quietly behind them, awaiting Blind Chen to act. They were waiting to see how he was going to open the relic of the bright temple. The relic of light had not been opened for countless years. Was it going to open just because a mere youth had arrived here? Yi Futian himself did not understand. Blind Chen claimed that Yi Futian could unravel the mystery of the bright temple. However, there was just a portal of light here. What did Yi Futian have to work with? This portal of light also seemed very dangerous. Blind Chen faced the portal of light. His expression was stern. He had not been here for many years. Today, there was finally hope for the mystery of light to be unraveled. He bowed slightly towards the portal of light and then prostrated himself on the ground, worshipping the portal. It was as though this was his religion, and he was displaying his unparalleled piety. When Yi Futian saw this scene, he revealed a strange look. Who was Blind Chen exactly? Why was he so pious towards the bright temple? Could it be that there existed a connection between Blind Chen and the temple? However, the bright temple was a top force in ancient times. Why would Blind Chen have a connection with it? Yi Futian had heard that Blind Chen had lived for many years. Even so, he could not possibly be a cultivator from ancient times who survived until the present day, right? If it were so, it would be inconceivable. The cultivators of the various major forces were also stunned. Only the senior figures had normal expressions. Nothing seemed strange to them. They had clearly seen Blind Chen acting this way before. Blind Chen uttered some strange sounds. The crowd did not understand what he had said. Blind Chen then got up and stood there facing the portal of light. He said, "More than 2 decades ago, I proclaimed that light would descend and the relic of the bright temple would reappear. Today is the day that the prophecy comes true. All of you wish to open the relic of the bright temple, right? Then, please enter the portal of light together." When they heard Blind Chen's words, the cultivators narrowed their gazes as they stared at his silhouette. Enter the portal of light? Everyone knew about the dangers of the portal. Was he asking them to seek their deaths by exploring inside? They obviously would not easily agree to do so. "Old Diviner, you and your group should be the ones to lead the way," said Patriarch Lin in a cold tone. Chapter 24:16. Probing. None of the other cultivators moved. Clearly, none of them wanted to help the others get to the prize inadvertently. If the entry to the portal of light could be obtained so easily, they would have entered it already instead of waiting until now. Everyone knew about the danger that lay just beyond the portal of light in the City of Light. Inside this seemingly transparent portal of light, a small world seemed to exist with an entire universe of its own. Blind Chen was quietly perceiving all of this, and he now commented casually, "You all want to explore the relic of the light, but none of you are willing to sacrifice anything. Do you think that the relic of the Temple of Light will just appear in front of you as you stand here, waiting for you to inherit it? Many years ago, I tried to open the relic of the Temple of Light, but it was only possible from the inside. Now, the one who can open the portal of light that I've been waiting for all this time is here. Next, all of you will need to cooperate so that everyone can enter the Temple of Light together. To pave the way for our young friend to open the portal of light means that there will inevitably be some sacrifices. After the relics of the Temple of Light reappear in the world, whatever you can get from it will depend only on yourselves." Blind Chen's voice could be heard throughout the void, and everyone heard it loud and clear. However, no one responded to him as they just looked at Blind Chen without revealing much in their expressions. Of course, many of them were looking at Yi Futian, the one who could open the portal of light. So, the cultivators from the 4 major principalities would enter the portal of light just to pave the way for him? Why should they? Why should they pin their hopes on a youngster? Who exactly is this person? "It's hardly convincing just based on an old diviner's say-so," said the Lan clan's leader in an indifferent tone. Up until now, none of them had been able to figure out Yi Futian's true identity. All they knew was that he came with Chen Yi to the City of Light. Perhaps it was Blind Chen who asked Chen Yi to search for him. "You don't need to know so much about who our young friend is. But if anyone in this world can unlock the secret of the portal of light, then, under the great emperor, I am afraid no one else except our friend here can get it done, Blind Chun continued nonchalantly. The likes of the great emperors were excluded, of course. They were imperial-level existences, which would make it much easier for them to open the relics of other great emperors, so they cannot be taken into consideration. Therefore, he said it had to be under the level of the great emperor. But even so, it was still mighty high praise coming from the blind man. Under the great emperor, was Futian the only one who could open the relic of light? I'm a little curious as to who he is, that the elder holds him in such a high esteem, someone else asked lightly. The person who spoke was Ho, the cultivator from the Yu family. He possessed powerful cultivation. He was a Ran Huang of the 8th realm and the next clan leader of the Yu family. He had already begun to take over its control. He was one who had high hopes for himself and was proud at heart. He did not address him as the old diviner, just as an elder. It seemed that he neither respected nor believed in Blind Chun. Under the great emperor, only Futian could achieve it, and all of them had to cooperate with Futian. I am curious as well to ask the cultivators of the 4 major principalities in the City of Light to cooperate with an outsider to open the portal of light. Simply based on elders' say-so is not really that meaningful, said Seven Knight Star Lord of the 7 Stars Mansion. He was another genius whose cultivation level was equivalent to Yu Ho's. He was the head of 7 great Star Lords of the 7 Stars Mansion. What Blind Chan said just now was for them to enter the portal of light and pave the way for Futian. The 4 top principalities in the City of Light paving the way for Futian. Why? The cultivator from the Lin family, who was in conflict with Blind Chun and the others, asked coldly. Why should they? How could a cultivator from the outside deserve such special treatment? Why? Blind Chun repeated casually and said, although all of you are extraordinary individuals in the City of Light, standing at the very top, if I am to be honest, I'm afraid that none of you can outshine our little friend. Futian revealed a strange look when he heard Blind Chun's words. It looked like Blind Chun was deliberately provoking cultivators from various forces. Did he mean to use him to bring these 4 major forces under control, so would they accept his command in the future? However, if Blind Chun had asked him to enter the portal of light by himself, he would have been rather reluctant to do so. Ultimately, though he had promised Blind Chun, he couldn't say he had implicit trust in him, and everyone knew that the portal of light was extremely dangerous. Ideally, it would be better if someone scouted out the way for him, so he could determine the level of danger. Everyone fell silent after hearing what Blind Chun had to say. All the top characters from their City of Light were here, and Blind Chun was talking nonsense again. Were they really no comparison to this white-haired young man? Is that so? Ho said nonchalantly, and without much emotion. I don't really believe it. How about the elder has him prove himself by entering the portal of light, letting us see? Sounds good, many cultivators echoed his sentiment, but each of them had their own scheme in mind. My young friend, I am afraid we will have to trouble you. Blind Chun spoke to Futian via voice transmission, and Futian immediately understood what he meant. It was probably just as he had speculated. Sure, Futian replied with a single word. He then took a step forward and said, You can confirm it yourselves? If the elder were right, you would be the first to enter. If the elder is wrong, then I will enter the portal of light first. Upon hearing Futian's words, everyone's eyes sharpened slightly. Ho and the others looked at Futian keenly until someone said, How can we confirm it? Don't feel obligated, Futian said casually, an invisible current flowing upon him. The aura of the great path effused from him, and the aura of Ren Huang in the 8th realm also bloomed. But when they felt his aura, all these cultivators were slightly relieved. After all, it seemed that he was not all that amazing. He was just in the 8th realm. In that case, I will do it, said a voice. In the void, Ho took a step forward, and countless eyes focused on him immediately. In the next moment, they saw an incredibly fervent sun appear behind Ho. The sun expanded rapidly, turning into a terrible vision that lay across the sky. An incomparable light began to shoot out from the vision. This divine light was not only the light of the flaming great path, it seemed to also contain the way of the light. In a moment, Countless rays of light rained down, not just on Futian's side, but they also snaked towards Blind Chun and the others. It was very obviously deliberate. But around Blind Chun and the others, an invisible power of light now shrouded them. It was Chen Yi who had made a move as he released the power of the light. Futian didn't move. He merely stood there and looked up. The divine light on Yuho's body shone directly on his body, making a sizzling sound. This terrifying force of destruction seemed to want to drill into Futian's body, but an incomparable divine light circulated upon his body, making it impossible for that destructive light to invade. What? Everyone frowned. How could this be? Although Yuho didn't make a direct move, the power he released was considerable. It was, however, completely ignored by the others. It's far too weak, whispered Futian, which made Yuho's heart tremble. Then, he saw Futian raise his head and look at him. Chapter 24:17. No way to fight back. Yuho's expression changed, just as the sun behind him was changing as well, turning into a huge solar pattern. In a brief moment, this vast area became fiery hot as the temperature rose sharply, about to incinerate the entire space. Pest! A piercing, sizzling sound was heard, and a terrifying light of destruction shot out from the solar divine pattern, illuminating Futian. In return, Futian simply raised his head to look at Yuho as he raised his hand and pointed towards the void. Buzz! A light from his finger directly penetrated the space and fell on that gigantic pattern. In an instant, the pattern was pierced and fissures began to appear. Yuho let out a muffled groan. His face paled as he retreated rapidly higher into the sky. Between Futian and him, a sword light appeared to connect heaven and earth like a sword that had traversed the void. It was not until Futian pulled back his arm that Yuho finally breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at the figure below with great shock. How could he be so strong? As the same existence of Ren Huang in the 8th realm, he had considered his combat effectiveness quite worthy. He himself was an extremely well-known figure in the Great Bright City. Yuho was the most outstanding cultivator of the Yu family's younger generation. But he was defeated by a single finger. All the cultivators surrounding them were looking at Futian with altered perception. Chen Yi had made a move before this. Lin Shi was obliterated, just as the light was blooming. This was before the cultivators from the Lin family had time to render aid. At the time, everyone could see that Chen Yi's strength was incredible. But Futian was the one Blind Chun felt compelled to welcome in person. Blind Chen's identity left a lot to the imagination, and his strength was a puzzle to them all. What they could have never imagined was Futian was so powerful that Yuho was defeated by a single finger, unable to put up much of a fight. If Futian stayed on the offensive, it was highly likely that Yuho would be slain. They didn't know that when Futian was yet a Ren Huang in the 7th realm, he had already defeated the Devil Emperor's direct disciple, who was in the 8th realm. Yuho may be a known figure in the Great Bright City, but compared to the direct disciple of the Devil Emperor, or even the descendants of the Great Emperor from the ancient God clan, he was far from being on the same level. How could he even begin to dream of combating Futian, who was in the same realm as him? The strength of the two was not even close. Furthermore, during the chaotic times in the original realm, Futian was in retreat for more than a decade, focusing solely on his cultivation. His strength had far surpassed where he once was, and he was not on a level that Yuho could compare with. Among all the cultivators present, except for Futian and his own group, only Blind Chun was not surprised. Since he knew about Futian's deeds in the original realm, he was quite unsurprised by his combat effectiveness. Just as he had said, people like Yuho may be the enchanting existence of Great Bright City, but in front of Futian, they dimmed in comparison. Who are you, really? Yuho stood in the void and questioned Futian while staring at him. Futian glanced at him without bothering to respond. Now that he had offended the Imperial Palace, there were still many forces in the Divine Prefecture that had not forgotten about him, even if Donghuang the Great had let him off the hook. Although there might not be much danger to speak of in the Great Bright Domain, he was not eager to expose himself. After this business finished, he planned to leave for the Western world immediately. Who else would like to give it a try? Futian asked, looking at the cultivators from the 4 top forces in the void. Now that Yuho was repelled by a single blow, Other cultivators in the 8th realm would hardly qualify as a challenge. For a time, no one moved a muscle. If no one else is interested in coming forward, then please enter the portal of light. Futian looked at the door in front of him and said, "The 7 Stars Mansion would like to see your strength." The 7-Night Star Lord of the 7 Stars Mansion stepped forward. Several others followed right behind him. Everyone looked alarmed. Were these 7 powerful cultivators ready to raise their hands against Futian? Us 7 at the 7-Star Mansion are one and the same. Your cultivation is superb. Hope you don't mind, said the 7-Night Star Lord. Obviously, he realized that the power of one man was hardly enough to affect Futian in any meaningful way. So he wanted the 7 of them to try in a united effort to see what kind of character this Futian was. As you please. Futian stood there quietly. It seemed as if he didn't mind at all that he was up against a party of 7. The 7-Star Lords levitated into the air. In an instant, the firmament underwent a drastic change, and a starry sky world appeared above them, covering the entire area. The 7-Star Lords were stationed in different directions, forming a kind of a matrix. 7 stars moved as one coherent entity. When Futian saw this, he slowly levitated into the air as well. After a while, he was suspended in the void right underneath the 7 cultivators. Buzz. The 7-Star Lords of the 7 Stars Mansion possessed an astounding aura. The stars revolved as 7 stars gathered together. The 7-Night Star Lord raised his hand and slammed towards Futian. Suddenly, a dull rumbling sound came from the sky. Many stars had gathered and surrounded that giant palm. It blasted toward Futian at the same time. Futian raised his head as he took in the sight. His mind turned ever so slightly, and suddenly, a miniature version of the starry sky world appeared around him. The starry light screen surrounded him and closed, turning into a defense. The attack in the void blasted down, and a sudden dull rumbling was heard. However, it could not shake the light screen that was blocked in front of Futian. The expressions on the faces of the 7-Star Lords changed a bit. Their divine consciousness twitched slightly, and suddenly, even more stars appeared between heaven and earth. However, at this moment, Futian's mind turned again, and countless starlight spread outward as the will of the great path shrouded the boundless space. Soon, a great starry sky world appeared in this space, and the stars in the sky were shining brightly. They were suspended in the sky, surrounding the starry sky world formed by the 7-Star Lords. All the onlookers watched with great interest. This was the suppression of the Great Path Domain, which directly overpowered the Great Path Domain of another. The 7-Star Lords watched the stars revolving in the sky. The power emitted from the stars alerted them. The energy effused from the 7-Night Star Lord gradually diminished as he looked at Futian and said, "It seems that the old diviner was right, after all." They had indeed been outdone by Futian. In an instant, the starlight dissipated, and their auras retracted as well. Seeing this, Futian did the same. The 7-Star Lords took one last look at Futian, then stepped back, but not without some deep thoughts of their own. Indeed, there would always be some youngsters out there that could get the better of them. They had thought that their strength was second to none, but they never expected that someone could suppress them to this degree that they had no ability to fight back. There were many other cultivators from the great bright city around the relic. Many of them were in total shock when they saw what just transpired in front of them. They were now even more curious about Futian and everything about him. In front of him, these top figures from the great bright city looked like weaklings. Obviously, it was not because they were weak, but that Futian was far too strong. "I don't think there is any need for more tests," Blindchen said. "I've already said that he is the one who can open the relic of the Temple of Light, and so he is. All of you have been in the great bright city for many years, and if you, too, want to open the relic of the Temple of Light, then please believe what I have said and assist our friend." Chapter 24:18 Entry. Everyone was silent. They had seen Futian's true strength, and it was indeed extraordinary. It seemed that what Blindchen had said could be true. However, entry to the Portal of Light had its own inherent risk. After all, there were many rumors about the Portal of Light. This was the only thing left from the glory days of the Temple of Light, thus shrouded in mystery. Among the people here, Only Blind Chun knew the portal of light the best. Furthermore, they couldn't fathom what Blind Chun was thinking or what he would do. They were concerned about some unforeseen motives on his part, and that was why they hesitated. If none of you want the relic of the Temple of Light to reappear, then just pretend I never said anything. Blind Chun continued, the person who can open it has been found, but your cooperation and assistance are requested. If you don't want to lend a hand, I will have to find some other way. Everyone remained silent when they heard Blind Chun's words. Even Futian himself didn't quite understand what Blind Chun had in mind, or why he was so convinced that he could solve the secret held by the Portal of Light. Although he had unlocked many relics belonging to great emperors, was Blind Chun's confidence in him based on the man behind the scenes? In other words, the one who arranged for Chun-Yi to meet him and guide him to this place. How many people do you need? Someone asked. It was the cultivator who had gotten into it with Blind Chun earlier, Patriarch Lin. Not long ago, he was all hot and bothered about getting a piece of Blind Chun, but now he was the first to speak, which was kind of surprising. True enough, in the face of their own interests, all grievances could be set aside for the time being. Of course, the more the better, the greater the chance. Blind Chun responded, moreover, the stronger the cultivation, the better. There is no point to send those with weaker cultivation. Patriarch Lin pondered for a moment and did not immediately answer him. The Lan family's clan leader also spoke up, what do you need us going for? Until now, they had no inkling of Blind Chun's plan. He might not be telling them everything, but they had to ask, at the very least, to scope things out. Blind Chun's answer was short and simple. You all know that there is a spatial world hidden behind the portal of light. But exactly what is inside, even I have no clue. Someone needs to scout the way ahead for our young friend here, so that he has the opportunity to open the relic. This is why your help is much needed. Blind Chun's straightforward answer convinced many. It could be that Blind Chun's really needed them to find the way inside the portal of light. How dangerous is it? Someone from the Yu family asked. How should I know? Blind Chun replied. I don't know that much about the portal of light either. I only know that the answer to opening this relic must lie beyond this portal of light. So I prophesied and strategized for this day. Today is the day that the light shall reappear. This is derived from my calculations. If my prediction is correct, then all of you will agree with me on this day anyway. Everyone couldn't help but reveal an odd look when they heard this, especially those from the Lin family. Those words sounded so familiar to them. It was not long ago since they heard the prediction made about Lin Shi. He had predicted that Lin Shi would face a catastrophe of death. But the premise was that Lin Shi would choose to raise her hand first, and indeed, Lin Shi had caused her own death. All things considered, they would agree to do this thing today. And did this mean that the long-awaited relic of the Temple of Light would be revealed once again in the world? You have all arrived. There's no need for you to continuing lurking in the dark, Patriarch Lin said loudly. Suddenly, in the distance, several powerful auras were detected from 3 major directions. Moments later, 3 powerful cultivators came out and walked over to them. They were the masters behind the other 3 top principalities. The Patriarch of the Lan family, the Patriarch of the Yu family, and the Chief of the 7 Stars Mansion. 3 cultivators who reigned above Ren Huang had descended. Their auras were terrifying, and their authority suppressed this corner of the sky. What do you think? Patriarch Lin asked as his eyes swept over the other 3. Since the old diviner has spoken, we have to help, Patriarch Yu said, and the others nodded in agreement. The Patriarch of Lan family looked at them and said, if this is the case, then let's first dispatch some cultivators from the family and have them assist the old diviner. Very well. As they reached a consensus, the cultivators from all the major forces returned to their bases to call on more cultivators. If the relic of the Temple of Light appears today, you will all be rewarded, Blind Chun said as he waited quietly. After some time, cultivators from those major forces arrived. Futian knew very well that those who were sent here were not key figures at the core of these major families, as they were being sent on a highly risky mission. Those major forces would be most reluctant to risk the lives of their most central figures. Even though Blind Chun had previously said that those with stronger cultivation were preferred, how could they abide by Blind Chun's words so easily? These cultivators were a little apprehensive at the moment. After all, they were supposed to enter the portal of light. However, the orders from their patriarchs were like orders from heaven, so even if they were reluctant, they had to obey. After waiting for some time, Blindshin spoke again and asked, "Is everyone ready?" "All set. Please tell us what you want us to do, old diviner," said Patriarch Lon. "Very well." Blindshin nodded and continued, "I must remind you that it is completely fine if you don't want to go in. But once you are in, I cannot guarantee anything that might happen inside the portal of light. If something happens, don't blame me." When everyone heard the old man's words, they were a little uncertain again. But Yuho spoke at this time, "Patriarch, I will go in as well." In the previous battle with Yi Futian, Yuho was defeated by a single blow. Obviously, the wound was still fresh for him. Now the opportunity to enter the portal of light was upon them. He wanted to see if he could seize his fortune there. The patriarch of the Yu family glanced at Yuho, then nodded, "As you wish." After that, the top figures from all major forces took the initiative to ask permission from their respective families, intending on gaining entry into the portal of light. Soon, the cultivators who were to enter the portal of light were confirmed. As all of them moved forward, Blind Chun said, "Everyone may proceed directly inside. It's best to be prepared, however. Just proceed straight ahead." Afterward, he spoke to Yi Futian via voice transmission. "After you enter the portal of light, you must rely on your own wit, my friend. Even I will not be much help, but I will go in with you." "I got it," Yi Futian replied. "Let's go," Blind Chen said in a low voice when he saw that the cultivators in front of them had already entered the portal of light. Yi Futian looked ahead. He saw those who walked through the portal of light simply disappear. It was as if they had entered a mirror. It was truly amazing to behold. Behind this portal of light was an entire universe, mysterious and unpredictable. "Once you enter, watch yourself," Blind Chen said. "I will do my best to protect you, my friend." Yi Futian sobered up some. Blind Chen's tone was serious, indicating that their mission this time was highly risky. More importantly, what Blind Chen said seemed to suggest that his cultivation must be superior. Chapter 24:19. Inside the Small World. Yi Futian told Uncle Tai, Hua Jieyu, and the others to stay on the outside. This was so that they could take care of Fang Xiyuan and the young ones outside while keeping an eye on the four major forces in case they had any tricks up their sleeves. Only Chun Yi and Yi Futian were the two that entered the portal of light with Blind Chun. Ultimately, this was their objective. Blind Chun asked Yi Futian to open the relic of the Temple of Light, which would then be inherited by Chan Yi. There was no need for the others to participate. As the cultivators entered the portal of light, Blind Chan Yi, and Yi Futian also stepped through the door. Suddenly, Yi Futian had a strange feeling, as if he had entered into another world. In an instant, endless light flooded the space, and under the light, no one could open their eyes. In this space, there was nothing but the light. It seemed that this was a world of the light. Other people had entered as well. In this bright world, everyone seemed to be blinded. They tried to sync the power of the Great Path with the space inside this world, but the whole world was occupied by the light, and they could not sync with the way of this world. There was only one kind of cultivator who was able to do so to some extent, and that was those who cultivated the method of light. Chen Yi's released his divine consciousness, fusing his own method with the great path of this world. However, he found that he could only control a small area around himself. It was as if his cultivation was completely insufficient. This was once the place where the Temple of Light chose their disciples. It was where they received the baptism of light. Many years ago, anyone who wanted to enter the Temple of Light had to undergo the test of light, also known as the baptism of light, which was right in front of this portal of light. Those who failed would be killed. Only those who survived the baptism of light were qualified to enter the Temple of Light. Blind Shan continued, "Just behind the portal of light, there is a murderous matrix of the light. I asked them to come with us inside for them to clear the way for us. Pay attention, my friend. I will also be watching out for you." "I got it." Yi Futian acknowledged the warning. Blind Shun was known as the Old Diviner by people from the City of Light. The cultivators of the City of Light wanted to use him to open the relic of the light, just like he was using the four major forces and had them send in their people as matrix fodder. People at this level were far from benevolent and gentle souls. But Futian also understood that although Blind Shin firmly believed that he was the one who could open the relic, he had no idea how that could be achieved or what kind of abilities he actually possessed. On the contrary, perhaps the man behind the scenes who guided Blind Shin knew much more. Not just about him, but also the secrets that were hidden behind the portal of light. He was so convinced that Futian would be the one to open it. Futian now released his perception freely, and wisps of aura circulated about him. The life spirit of the ancient tree of life was swaying inside his body with a faint glow of imperial glory. He understood that in this world of light, the divine power was the one that drove this space. Otherwise, it would not have been so powerful. Therefore, ordinary cultivators were blinded in this world of light. Only those with an equivalent level may explore and see into this world, and only the power of a higher level was qualified to examine this world. Futian did not hesitate to release the aura inside his body. He directly resorted to pumping his own life spirit into this world of light. At the same time, his eyes opened, and those eyes seemed a little wicked. There were stripes across the pupils, like the eyes of a deity, probing the secrets of this world. At this moment, Futian could clearly see the area around him. It turned out to be a ruin. It looked like the aftermath of a world that had been shattered. The power of light was sprinkling down from a distance away, but everything was a little fuzzy. With his realm, he could only probe the area immediately around him. This here is the shattered temple, Futian said as he stepped onto the ruins. The cultivators in front of him continued forward, and suddenly there was a shrill scream. Futian looked in the direction of the scream and saw a light from above the sky directly shining upon that person. Instantly, one could see that person's eyes revealing their agonizing pain as his hands covered his eyes. There was blood flowing from them. It was an extremely shocking sight. Futian tried to perceive what was above, but it was a bit unclear. It seemed as if a strange power enveloped this world. There seemed to be a murderous matrix that hovered above the firmament above. The baptism of light? Futian murmured to himself and realized right away that he could not set foot there. Over there, extremely radiant divine light penetrated the space, waiting to kill any passers-by. Blind Shin seemed to have perceived it as well. The cane in his hand hit the ground and made a sound, indicating that he had veered away from that position and followed the person who hadn't had an accident in front of him. Obviously, he had exceptional perception and was able to ascertain the specific location of the danger, thus avoiding it. Off and on, people were attacked and many fell. Futian could see all of this clearly, except for those who were too far ahead. The cultivators from the four major forces were proceeding with increased caution. Some even slowed down and were reluctant to be at the front. Obviously, they had become aware of Blind Shin's true intention, which was using them as sacrifices in the bid to get through to the relic. At this time, the cultivators from the four major forces began to feel resentment in their hearts. Old Diviner seems to know about the situations in here, an indifferent voice questioned. The speaker was Patriarch Lin. Several figureheads also came in with everyone. Since Blind Shin had come inside, they felt there was nothing to be afraid of. However, even they were exercising extreme caution. They followed behind the crowd, scattered behind Blind Shin. Just as Blind Shin followed behind their people, they were following behind Blind Shin. Blind Shin did not seem to see it, nor did he care, as long as he achieved his own goal. "I've heard some of it," Blind Shin responded. "Stop, all of you," the patriarch of the Yu family commanded. "Stop." Several others also spoke up. Suddenly, the cultivators from the four major forces stopped. For a time, in this small world inside the portal of light, everything became so quiet that they could even hear the sound of their own breathing. "The old diviner has gotten us knee-deep in this now. At least tell us what is going on." Patriarch Yu said coldly. Obviously, they knew that Blind Shin only told them some of the truth. It was highly likely that Blind Shin knew the condition of the small world inside the portal of light. Blind Shin stood quietly where he was and replied, "I have already told you that I know very little. You all knew the danger in here before you came in, so why bother asking again?" "What's ahead?" the chief of the Seven Stars Mansion asked. This spatial world was fraught with danger, and now they wanted to know what was ahead. Blind Chun was silent for a moment and then exclaimed, "The real relic of the Temple of Light." As soon as he said that, everyone was quiet. Chapter 24:20, Bright Temple. As expected, Blind Chun knew about it. He actually knew that the real Bright Temple was hidden within the small world of the Portal of Light, and he had been waiting for this day all along. Blind Chun, who was he actually? Although Blind Chun only told them part of the truth earlier, for some reason, all of the cultivators from the various forces subconsciously believed that the relic of the Bright Temple was right ahead. Although they couldn't see anything, they had no doubts about it. Perhaps they would be able to see some light once they walked out of this area. "Continue forward," Patriarch Lin ordered. He decisively made the people of his clan continue. "Be careful. Try your best to avoid any danger," Patriarch Lon said as well, though his reminder clearly wasn't very sincere. Otherwise, why didn't he walk at the front himself? After all, these clan elders were the strongest among the cultivators, so they would have the greatest chance of evading danger if they ran into any. Yet, they obviously didn't do so as they were worried that they themselves would be caught up in dangerous situations. The cultivators didn't dare to disobey them, so they bit the bullet and continued to move forward, opening up the path for those behind them. The aura continued to spill out from Futian. As he walked forward, the area that he could sense also became larger and larger. He could vaguely feel the murderous matrix of light above them, and the core of the matrix was right ahead as well. Ah! Just then, a blood-curdling scream came from darkness ahead of them, followed by several more. It seemed that none of the cultivators who moved forward managed to escape. "What's happening there?" someone asked. Immediately, panic started to spread through the crowd. The cultivators leading at the front hesitated as well. In Futian's world of perception, in front of them, rays of light were shining down from the void above to form a cylindrical beam on the debris. At the center of the beam, light of obliteration was shooting down, destroying all the cultivators who walked into it. Moreover, these rings were now all interconnected. Unlike before, it was covering the entire space with its deadly attacks. "Keep walking forward, do not stop," Patriarch Lin snarled. The expressions on the faces of the Lin clan cultivators quickly turned a little ugly. It seemed that the elders really didn't care about their lives at all. But the elders never cared about matters in the clan, and they had a fragile connection with the clan members, essentially not knowing them at all. It was honestly not surprising for the elders to not care about their lives. They were far more concerned about whether they can get something out of this door of space. "The path ahead is a dead end," Futian said. All of the cultivators immediately stopped and started hesitating, unsure of whether they should keep moving. Obviously, even with the orders given to them, they knew that there was a large possibility they would die. Most of them wouldn't be willing to do it. They were now facing a dilemma. Before them laid a death trap. Not a single cultivator who entered previously came out alive. Now, if they continued in, they would likely die. Under such circumstances, everyone was struggling. "Old diviner, what's the meaning of your little friend there?" Patriarch Lin asked impassively. He didn't expect Futian to advise people not to move forward, saying it was a death trap. By now, they've all realized that the relic of the Bright Temple could be just a short distance away from them. "Of course it was out of goodwill," Blind Chun answered. "Can't you sense that it's a dead end there?" Dead end? Although the cultivators had their eyes closed, their eyebrows raised in curiosity. "Old diviner, if it's a dead end, then what should we do?" Patriarch Lon asked. Blind Chun remained silent. It seemed like he perceived the danger before them. On the other hand, Futian walked forward a few steps and was instantly able to see more clearly. As he walked to the edge of the circular murderous matrix, Blind Chun reminded him, "Careful." "It's fine," Futian said. "Chun-E, come here." Chun-E walked forward as he heard Futian. He stood still and waited for Futian's next move. "Do you believe in me?" Futian asked. "Yes," Chun-E nodded. After all these years, Chun-E knew Futian's character well. Also, since they were already inside, what was there to not believe him about? Walk in there, and make sure that other than the aura of light, there's no other aura on you, not even a slither. You must only have the purest of light, Futian said. There was no way to avoid this murderous matrix. The only way is to walk through it. He could feel that the rays of light before them could kill any great path powers except for the great path of light. In other words, only the great path of light could survive it. Only those who possessed the purest great path of light could receive the baptism of light and pass through the matrix. All right, Chunyi nodded and walked forward according to Futian's instructions. He retracted all the auras of the great paths on him. Afterward, only the powers of light flowed across the surface of his body. He walked forward with his eyes closed and took deep breaths. He was actually slightly nervous. But the next moment, he entered a state of zen. As he bathed under the light, there were no other auras on him other than light. It was as if he had turned into the most perfect, flawless illuminating body of the great path. Chunyi was showered with a marvelous feeling. His footsteps slowed as he continued forward. It was as though he was enjoying every step. With every circle he walked past, he continued to greedily enjoy the baptism of the light. I knew it. It wasn't antagonizing, Futian said softly. Countless rays of light shone down from above and landed on where Chunyi was. Then, the entire matrix morphed, and a path was opened up. Everything before them turned clear as well. Futian watched what happened before him with shock and awe. His heart was moved by the magnificent display. Before them, a shockingly brilliant scene appeared. It was a divine temple so tall that the top was shrouded by mists and clouds. The entire temple was illuminated by divine light shining from above, and it looked like a holy relic in every sense of the word. The bright temple. Futian's heart pounded. He could scarcely believe that the bright temple was hidden within the small world inside the portal of light. This was an ancient myth that had been passed down for countless years. Legend had it that the great Emperor of Light created the bright temple in ancient times and erected it here. Countless years had passed since. People still remember this legend, and the region of light kept its name. He didn't expect that he would see the holy land showered by the light in this small world after all these years. The light became more magnificent as more and more rays shone down, affecting everyone's vision except for Futian's. His eyes were still wide open as he stared at the scene before him. Chapter 24-21. Apostle. Everything before them proved that the legends were all real. The region of light was indeed where the bright temple was. Futian looked forward. The divine temple was incredibly grandiose and magnificent. It looked like an enormous castle, extending into the skies to shine down an endless array of light from high up in the air. Other than being ancient, the temple was a little dilapidated, with several areas damaged. These seemed to be damage from the Great War of the ancient era. Below the divine palace, there was a door that looked like another portal of light. Two statues of light, each holding a scepter, stood on either side of the door. They seemed to be the guardians of light. The light continued morphing gradually. Yuho opened his eyes too as he could finally see the scene before him clearly. It sent waves of shock through his heart. He said softly, "I didn't think that the legend was real. This is indeed a divine relic." One by one, the others opened their eyes. Although they were a little unaccustomed to the light, they were all gradually able to start seeing the scene before them. Perhaps it was because of the changes in the physical space of this small world. When they raised their head to look at the skies above the divine palace, they could see a diagram of light that looked like a divine matrix. The power of light was shining down from there, guarding the divine palace. The cultivators started walking forward one after another. The cultivators' eyes from each of the forces started getting heated as their gazes slowly filled with greed and desire. For generations, they had been on guard at the region of light. Now, they finally saw the divine relic. They didn't think Blind Chin's prophecy would come true just by walking through the murderous light matrix. No one thought that it would be that easy to break through the murderous matrix. Perhaps it was because they knew nothing about light, yet Futian could see right through it. Bling Chun walked forward, supporting himself with the cane in his hand. He came before the remains of the bright temple and knelt on the ground once again. He kowtowed to the temple with great piety, as if he was the most pious believer of the bright temple, which made everyone even more suspicious of his true identity. Perhaps Blind Chun was related to the bright temple. Then, Blind Chun stood up and said, "Chunyi, Go in? Yes. Chunyi stepped forward and walked towards the divine palace. Futian, sorry to trouble you, Blind Chun then said to Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded and followed behind Chan Yi, preparing to escort him into the Temple of Light to inherit the powers of light. Perhaps all of the secrets laid inside the Temple of Light. Just then, several extremely powerful auras erupted inside the space. The cultivators from all four of the great forces intervened, and the four elders were the first to attack. Patriarch Lin was the fastest amongst them. With just a thought, he spawned a sword so great that it deluged the skies, traveling across the space and attacking Chen Yi and Yi Futian. But at the same time, Blind Chen turned. His back was facing where Chunyi said he was. Blazing will of bright erupted from his body, blinding everyone who looked at it directly. The light inundated the space and blocked off Chunyi from him. Formless pulses erupted from the voids as the will of light collided with the will of sword from Patriarch Lin. At this moment, Blind Chen finally unleashed his spectacular power. He turned out to be a cultivator who had overcome the divine tribulation of the Great Path as well. His power level was definitely comparable to the four great elders. Stop him, Patriarch Lin said with an ice-cold voice. Instantly, cultivators from all of the four great forces attacked. They had already paid a heavy price to get here and had suffered great losses, including the death of many of their clan members. Now that they had finally reached the divine palace, how could they let Chun-Yi enjoy the fruits of their sacrifices alone? If they allowed him to do so, it would really be putting in all this effort for someone else. Blind Chen's cane suddenly knocked a few times on the ground of the bright temple debris. Instantly, stone fragments and dust started flying, and at the same time, blazing light filled up the void. Everywhere the light went, terrified shrieks could be heard. The cultivators who dashed forward were pierced straight through by the light before being turned into ash and disappearing into the air. Sword of Light. The expressions on the four strongest cultivators changed. In just an instant, many of their cultivators died. They had all been killed by Blind Chen. Many of them had been Ran Huang-level cultivators. This made the rest of them hesitate and not dare to move forward. Blind Chen stood there as if he was a one-man army. Yi Futian and Chunyi had already walked through the door and entered the bright temple. Boom! The four great elders stepped forward at the same time. A terrifying dominion of the starry great path appeared around them. Celestial stars surrounded them and blocked out the skies, and the sun and intercepted the sword will of light from Blind Chun. A divine sun diagram appeared behind the great elder of the Yu clan and launched toward Blind Chun, clashing into his sword of light. It took a coordinated attack from the four strongest cultivators at the same time to stop the might of Blind Chen's path. Get in! Patriarch Lin's raised voice echoed through the air, immediately prompting the rest of the cultivators to dash forward, going around the battlefield to enter the bright temple. The path might of the four great cultivators attacked simultaneously, attempting to overwhelm Blind Chun as the elders moved in an attempt to bypass him and enter the divine palace. At this point, they were far more concerned about the relic of the bright temple than if Blind Chun was dead or alive. While Blind Chun couldn't see, the four cultivators' every move appeared in his perception. An even more magnificent light erupted from him. Instantly, a dominion of light appeared and engulfed the skies. Inside this dominion, the four elders squinted as if they could no longer see. Here, there was only light. It was actually similar to what they had experienced inside the divine matrix of light. Could it be that this was a type of the powers of the laws of light? But inside this light, they saw a pair of eyes that made their hearts pound. Those eyes contained endless lights. It was Blind Chen's eyes. Blind Chen opened his eyes. He opened his eyes with light. TSSS. When the four great elders witnessed those eyes, they felt a stinging pain inside their irises, and their eyes started to bleed uncontrollably. The power of light had infiltrated their spiritual soul, attempting to purify everything and obliterate them in the process. A furious roar surged through the void as a formless sword pierced through space, stabbing toward their eyes within a fraction of a second. Yet the next moment, the eyes disappeared and reappeared in another location. It was as though these eyes weren't actual eyes but the eyes of light. Blind Chin's tattered clothes fluttered in the air as he stood atop the rubbles with an unyielding expression. The cane in his hand had morphed into a scepter of light, similar to the scepter in the hands of the guardians who stood before the Bright Temple. Blind Chin was indeed related to the Bright Temple. He was the apostle of the Bright Temple who shouldered a mission passed down for generations. His mission was to find the heir of light, and Chun-Yi was the one he was looking for. For him, Blind Chan could sacrifice everything. The only reason he stayed behind to block the way and let Yi Futian bring Chan-Yi into the Bright Temple was that he had absolute trust in Yi Futian. Or perhaps it's better to say that he had absolute trust in the person who came to look for him back then. Chapter 24-22 Invincible Renhuang. Yi Futian and Chan-Yi took the lead to enter the Temple of Light. A path of light appeared in front of them. There were many guardians on both sides, but they were motionless like statues. There was no aura coming from any of them, but their bodies were in surprisingly good condition. It was as if they had been obliterated directly without ever putting up a fight. "Let's move," said Yi Futian. He and Chan-Yi walked in the direction where the light was coming from. After a few moments, they came to a place under the light. On the ground in front, there was a matrix of the light as the light was spilling down from the firmament. The light isolated the space and seemed to prevent them from going any further. Neither of them acted carelessly, but stopped just outside the light. This divine matrix was probably not something straightforward and simple. The space inside the temple was massive, and the light beam radiated from the void. In this beam of light, there was no vitality. Yi Futian could feel vaguely that within that light in front, there was no room for any other great path power. There was not even a speck of dust. It was the purest of light. This divine matrix seemed to share something in common with the matrix on the outside. Chun-Yi's eyes flickered, and he had a desire to try it. But at this time, the cultivators from behind also caught up to them. The cultivators from the four forces were moving with incredible speed. They only slowed down when they were right behind them. Wisps of great path auras were released and enveloped the space. These cultivators had cut off any chances of retreating. They looked at the light beam in front of them with the same strong sense of dread. After all, everything that happened on the outside was still fresh in their memory. They got here by stepping on the bones of their many companions. Otherwise, they would have never been able to get this far. This was a path forged by the lives of the cultivators from all four major forces. "Go forward and enter," said a voice. It was none other than the clan leader of the Lin family, Lin Kong. Patriarch Lin was one of the four cultivators fighting outside with Chen Blind, while everyone else was inside. Lin Kong and several other peak Renhuang cultivators were now inside as well. All of them unleashed a powerful coercion as the pressure pushed against both Yi Futian and Chan-Yi. It was trying to force them into the divine matrix to open a way for them and see what would happen. Before, the cultivators from the four major forces had scouted the way, but now, it was Yi Futian and Chan-Yi's turn. Considering the great pressure released by all the cultivators, Yi Futian and Chan-Yi appeared exceptionally calm, as if they hadn't heard anything they said. Yi Futian's eyes were still looking at the divine matrix just ahead. He was perceiving whether or not this divine matrix was the same as the one outside, and if entry could be gained using the incomparably pure light. As for the people behind, he didn't really care for them, not even a bit. When he saw that the two had completely ignored him, Lin Kong and the others had an extremely cold look about them, and their attention was now on Chan-Yi. Since Blind Chin told them that Yi Futian was the key to opening the relic, they would first start with Chan-Yi. Chan-Yi had killed his descendant, Lin Shi. When his thought turned to this, Lin Kong's eyes became cold, and he took a step forward. Then, he raised a finger and pointed in Chan-Yi's direction. Buzz! A tremendously radiant light burst out of Chan-Yi. His body as the center, a sword wheel of light appeared, surrounding him and clashed with the terrifying sword wheel that came in for the kill. The explosion erupted with frightening power, causing the sword of light in front of Chan-Yi to shatter as he took a step back simultaneously. His cultivation was Renhuang in the 8th realm, so attacks from cultivators in the 9th realm could still threaten him. "Are you going in by yourself, or should we make you?" Lin Kong took a step forward and said coldly to Chan-Yi. An invisible sword will envelop Yi Futian and Chan-Yi, and they felt that the space around them contained a horrific sword will. It was as if just a thought would drive the sword will to descend upon them in an instant. Yi Futian turned around slowly and looked in Lin Kong's direction. He walked towards Lin Kong and said, "If so, you can go in." Lin Kong frowned. Was he telling him to go in? Although Yi Futian's cultivation was tremendous, and he had defeated Yu Ho in the 8th realm and the 7 Star Lords, the gap between them was a fact. He was a peak Ren Hung in the 9th realm, and at this moment, Yi Futian was so arrogant and confident that he told Lin Kong to go in. Yi Futian stopped, standing there with his white robe fluttering. He looked incredibly confident in himself and gave the onlookers a sense of preeminence. It was as if he was immovable. Buzz. A horrible sword will shrouded Yi Futian. In an instant, Yi Futian felt that he had entered the world of swords. Although nothing seemed to be around him, he knew that he had already fallen into his opponent's domain of swordsmanship. He could perceive that it was an invisible domain, and in this domain around him, the swords were everywhere, hidden in the invisible space. "You're much too insolent," said Lin Kong. As soon as his voice faded, he made the gesture of squeezing his palm. Suddenly, there was a terrifying sharp sound all around Yi Futian, and the invisible sword that hid in the space moved at the same time. They slashed through the space, slicing through the void where Yi was. It seemed that with just a single thought, that space would be shattered into smithereens. Yi Futian stood there and didn't move, but there was divine light circulating over the surface of his body. His physical body seemed to have been transformed into a divine body in an instant. He was surrounded by the incomparable divine light of the great path, and a shocking roar erupted from his body. A sharpish sound came out, and the space seemed to have been cut into fragments, with numerous sword marks. The terrible attack was coming at Yi Futian as well, and he actually seemed to be its focal point. Pest! A harsh, scratchy sound came from Yi Futian's body. Divine light blazed all over his body. Everyone was shocked to discover that when the sword will cut through the space and descended upon him, it was unable to move Yi Futian even an inch. How is this possible? Lin Kong's expression changed quickly to shock. His great path attack could not break down Yi Futian's defense. How could this happen? Was this really a cultivator in the 8th realm? The expression of those surrounding cultivators changed. A cultivator of the 9th realm could not make Yi Futian move. How horrific was this physical body? At this time, when they looked at Yi Futian again, he was surrounded by the divine light as if he were some kind of deity, invincible and all-powerful. Yi Futian's clothes were moving freely. When he was still in the 7th realm, he had already defeated Xiao Mu, the direct disciple of the Devil Emperor. Now that he was in the 8th realm, he was battling superior Renhuang in the 9th realm. Lin Kong was not even a concern for him. It seemed that the Great Bright City was still a pretty weak opponent for him. The current strength of Yi Futian's divine body was already at the limit of an ordinary Renhuang of the 9th realm. Yi Futian was confident that he was close to being invincible and was difficult to defeat by cultivators in the Renhuang realm unless it were those exceptional enchanting figures of the world. "Are you going in by yourself, or should I make you?" Yi Futian asked Lin Kong. It was something Lin Kong had said to Chen Yi before, but now Yi Futian was using on him. Chapter 24-23. Change. Lin Kong's gaze froze. His attack could not even move his opponent an inch. What level of physique was this? If this was the case, how could he fight him? Other cultivators next to him were trembling as well, and no one dared to act hastily. They were all shocked by what they saw just now. Lin Kong was in existence at the peak of Renhuang, and there were just a few people who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him here. If Lin Kong's attack could not shake Yi Futian physically, there was no point in anyone doing anything. When he saw that Lin Kong did not react, Yi Futian stepped forward. When Lin Kong saw him coming, his eyes showed a trace of defiance. He, who was at the peak of Renhuang, was cowed by a youngster. When his thought turned to this, his whole body became most radiant. The sword screen shrouded the boundless space, and suddenly, sword will was everywhere in the space within this temple. "Kill!" Lin Kong pointed his finger forward, and immediately there were countless sword marks in the space, arranged in a crisscross pattern. They not only segmented the void, but were also cutting at Yi Futian's body. This kind of attack was invisible and shapeless. Any ordinary Renhuang in the 8th realm would have been shattered and extinguished instantly. But the one he encountered was Futian. The sword marks carved in space blasted on Futian's body, producing a sharpish sound. The divine body was extremely brilliant, like an invincible golden body, completely unshakable. Futian continued moving forward, but at the same time, Lin Kong's finger came slamming down. At this moment, Lin Kong's entire body was also bathed in the sword light. Between his fingers, the invisible sword will penetrated the void, and everything in front of him seemed to be shattered into nothing. This one finger aimed at Futian as if concentrating all its power for a final fight. Clearly, Lin Kong realized that the strength of this white-haired young man was far above his. The streamers of the great path upon Futian's body was flowing about, and endless characters seemed to be circulating. He pointed his finger forward, and his body suddenly turned into a sword body of the great path. This finger seemed to be the sharpest sword in the world right now. Their fingers collided. A terrifying current of swordsmanship swept out, raging between heaven and earth. Then, they saw Lin Kong's finger shattered, as the sword will penetrated through his arm. Blood spurted everywhere, and that arm was torn to pieces. Lin Kong let out a chilling scream as a giant hand clasped tightly around his neck. This hand was strong and sturdy. It seemed as if any movement could end his life for good. At this moment, there was a strong sense of dread in Lin Kong's heart. Not only him, but the cultivators from the Lin family, as well as those around them, watched while their hearts trembled violently. Was this really the clan leader of the Lin family who was at the peak of Renhuang? In front of Futian, a mere Renhuang in the 8th realm, he had no way of fighting back. The one strike he unleashed was blocked, and caused his arm to be totally destroyed, and his life was now in the hands of his opponent. How could a Renhuang in the 8th realm be this tyrannical? Futian's eyes were sharp as they fixed upon Lin Kong. They were like the eyes of a deity, looking down on the Renhuang of the 9th realm in front of him. Several other peak Renhuang were watching, speechless. No wonder Blind Qian was not worried, and merely occupying himself by tangling up a few patriarchs. It turned out that Futian was exceptionally powerful. Futian picked Lin Kong up and walked towards that divine matrix of light. When they reached the front of the matrix, Futian's arm pitched, and Lin Kong's body was thrown into the divine matrix of light. In the sky above, beams of light spilled down, and countless beams of light landed on Lin Kong at the same time. Lin Kong let out a horrific scream, and then his body was penetrated by the light. The next moment, under everyone's shocking gazes, his body turned into light as well. It completely dissipated between heaven and earth, not leaving the slightest trace. This, a cultivator at the peak of Renhuang, under the light, disappeared directly and completely, turning into spots of light. The peak of Renhuang, gone in a flash. Of everyone that was here, who could enter that divine matrix of light. Just as I thought, Futian remarked silently to himself. This divine matrix of light did not allow for the existence of any other great path except the light itself. However, he was feeling a little differently than before. Previously, when the divine matrix was circulating, there seemed to be a special kind of light that appeared, and it was not just a murderous matrix. Let me try. Futian stepped forward, and inside the life-spirit world of his body, the ancient tree of the world swayed. Currents that were shining with the divine glory of the great emperor spread outward. They then flowed into that divine matrix of light. Suddenly, the light within the divine matrix seemed to detect the invasion of other great path powers, and suddenly, rays of brilliant divine light were shining, wanting to wipe out this invading force. However, this strand of will of the way seemed unable to be erased. It was still existing in that light, wandering inside, invading gradually, even covering the area around the divine matrix of the light. Chun-Yi, bring those who were in the altercation before and send them inside, said Futian. Chun-Yi nodded in acknowledgement. Before, in addition to Lin Kong, several others from the Lin family had taken action against Futian and himself. Clearly, he had perceived it. When he turned around, Chun-Yi's eyes fell on the two people from the Lin family. He asked, "Do you want to go in on your own, or should I make you?" The two men paled while their bodies were moving rapidly in retreat. Entering that divine matrix was the same as death. Why would they go in there themselves? Buzz. Seeing the reaction of the two, Chen Yi's body turned into a light, and the two Runhuang were caught at the same time. As the light flashed, the two Runhuang were thrown into the divine matrix. Suddenly, under the light beam of the divine matrix, the two figures slowly dissipated and turned into light, just like Lin Kong. It seemed that anyone who came here would face the same fate. But at this moment, the striations of light in the divine matrix changed, which was clearly captured by Yi Futian. Suddenly, he seemed to understand everything. Same as before, but this time, you have to be more cautious. Any carelessness will result in total annihilation. Can you do it? Yi Futian asked Chen Yi. Chen Yi's expression was particularly grave as he nodded. The way of light enveloped his body, and his entire person seemed to have turned into a physique of light as he walked forward. Chen Yi was born to be extraordinary. After all, he was an illumining body of the great path himself. Because of that, he maintained the purest state of light, which was also why Yi Futian felt comfortable allowing him to try. If it were someone else, that person would surely die. Blind Chun had found Chen Yi as the heir to inherit the light, so he most likely knew about this as well. Chen Yi stepped into the light, and suddenly rays of light passed through his body as he released his great path of light to its limit. His whole body released an incomparable light, and he became one with the light inside. At the same time, Yi Futian's eyes were closed tightly, his mind moving slightly. Suddenly, the striations within the divine matrix were moving, as if controlled by his will. Below the divine matrix, a divine light shot straight up into the sky above, weaving together with the light that was falling down. Then, the two went straight above the firmament. At this moment, a terrible rumbling sound could be heard, and the whole temple was trembling. The divine light that burst out of the divine matrix was becoming more brazen. Yi Futian's power of the great path retracted as he stared ahead. In ancient times, this divine matrix was probably urged by cultivators of the temple, but now there was just him. Chapter 24:24, Eyes Open. Once the divine matrix was activated, a phantom appeared within the beam of light behind Chen Yi, like a heavenly god, and surrounded him. In the next moment, Chen Yi's body swaying upwards, following the light released by the divine matrix all the way to the temple. The phantom of light disappeared with him. It was as if they had entered the core of the temple together. The beam of light suddenly dimmed as the divine matrix disappeared, and the light was gone. Inside the temple, loud rumbling continued, and the temple seemed on the verge of collapse. It seemed as if this divine matrix was the thing that supported the last ray of light from the temple. Yi Futian looked thoughtful at this moment. So, if the divine matrix of the light disappeared, would the temple of light collapse? This was the temple of light where the gods gathered in ancient times, so it could not have crumbled so easily. That was unless the temple was already in shambles from the collapse eons ago, but had been repaired only on the outside. The last divine matrix left in the temple of light was the power that had been holding it up all this time. From this perspective, the temple of light was very likely in possession of that last trace of the will from the gods, waiting for some future heir to inherit the light. When the person finally showed up, the temple would self-destruct and give way. As for Blind Chen, he was probably aware of some of these circumstances. He may have been searching for an heir of the light and found Chen Yi. Then, everything seemed to make sense now. The temple of light trembled even more violently. Looking up, cracks began to appear on the temple as it started to disintegrate. However, the cultivators here were extremely powerful, so nothing untoward would happen to them. Still, their hearts were greatly shocked. Where had Chen Yi been sent to? Bang! A falling boulder came down, and the divine light surrounding Yi Futian knocked the boulder away from him. The ruins around him began to pile up, and it didn't take long for the entire temple to come down completely. At the same time, there seemed to be a boundless, dazzling light above the sky that forced their eyes shut. In the next moment, an invisible force seemed to push them as the stars revolved, and the whole world was in a state of disintegration. Yi Futian closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened his eyes again, the ruins were still under his feet, but they were no longer the ruins of the temple of light inside. In front of them, there was a door, the portal of light. On this portal of light, dazzling light was still blooming. It was as if it was the light that had pushed them out. All the cultivators who had entered it before were sent out at this time, including the 5 top figures who fought outside the Temple of Light. Facing such a mysterious situation, they had no intention to continue fighting. In fact, they had stopped fighting as soon as the temple began to collapse and the light bloomed. Watching the collapsing temple, their hearts were greatly disquieted. The temple had been turned to dust. Was this the Temple of Light they were looking for? And now, they had been sent outside. What was going on? What was happening? Patriarch Lin and other top figures asked as they looked for their youngsters. At the same time, Patriarch Lin found that Lin Kong, the clan leader of the Lin family, was missing. He wondered if that meant Lin Kong had been left behind in the Portal of Light. What did that mean? Could it be that Lin Kong had gotten the opportunity? But in the next moment, his hope was dashed. He saw some cultivators of the Lin family lowered their heads while others wore an expression of grief and indignation. Obviously, Lin Kong did not receive the inheritance, and from the reactions of those people, he could guess Lin Kong's fate. However, Lin Kong was a peak Renhuang, and none of the people who entered had higher cultivation than him. At the most, they were even. So who killed him? My young friend. Blind Chen noticed Chun Yi's absence with just a glance. He lowered his head slightly and called out to Yi Futian. However, Yi Futian already knew what he meant and replied, "Don't worry, sir. Chun Yi has already touched the light." Blind Chen squeezed the cane in his hand. It seemed as if he was relieved. He raised his head slightly, facing the sky above, and said, "Thank you for your guidance." No one knew who he was referring to, but Yi Futian gathered that it might be to the person who had told Blind Chen to find him once upon a time. Blind Chen was an honest man. Even though the man from many years ago was not here, he still felt the need to express his gratitude. "My friend, great kindness has no adequate way to be repaid. After Chun Yi inherits the light, he will follow and assist you always," Blind Chen said to Yi Futian again. Several major cultivators who were around them were impressed by his words. Who exactly was this Yi Futian character? The blind man claimed outright that after Chan Yi inherited the light, he would assist Yi Futian. If Chan Yi were to inherit the light, he would be the heir of the great Emperor of Light and the heir to the God of Light from ancient times. Would such a cultivator assist Yi Futian? Assist him to what end? But at this time, the cultivators from other major forces briefed their patriarchs on what happened inside the Temple of Light via voice transmission. Suddenly, their gazes toward Yi Futian changed. He, who was a Run Huang in the 8th realm, had taken down Lin Kong so effortlessly. Furthermore, Lin Kong's attack failed to shake his physical form, and he was captured by him instead of being tossed into the divine matrix of the light. He met his end there. Buzz. Suddenly, a terrifying sword will was born between heaven and the earth. Patriarch Lin rose into the sky. As the sword will covered the entire sky, it hovered above this area as if it was omnipresent. Watch it. Blind Chen's body appeared in front of Yi Futian in just a moment, as the most radiant light shrouded them both. The terrifying sword will descended upon them, but was blocked by the light. If he were any slower, that terrifying attack would have landed right on top of Yi Futian. High above the sky, Patriarch Lin carried powerful momentum, and an absolute sword domain appeared in the space as if this was his world. A terrifying sword light shot out from his eyes as he looked at Yi Futian and said, "No matter who you are, you must die today." There was a strong murderous intent in this voice. Patriarch Lin was determined to kill Yi Futian not only because of Lin Kong's death, but also because he was the one who dashed their long-awaited hopes and dreams. The other 3 cultivators levitated into the air as well. Their eyes were fixed on Blind Chen and Yi Futian. They had released a terrifying aura as they intend on continuing the battle from before. Yi Futian's brows knitted slightly. The auras from all 4 cultivators exploded at the same time, covering the vast space. It seemed that he might have to use the body of Shunjia, the great emperor, for the fight. "My friend, watch Chen Yi for me. I have other business to attend to," said Blind Chen. His voice was incredibly calm, containing neither joy nor sorrow. It seemed as if he was stating a simple fact, but Yi Futian had heard the implications in those words. He began, "Sir, You don't need to. Before he could finish his sentence, Blind Shen was already high above the sky and replied, My friend, the secret of heaven has been revealed, and I shall no longer be seen in the world. I am the agent of light, and now that the light has appeared, there is nothing in the world to detain me. Eyes open. When his voice fell, Blind Shen, who had been blinded for countless years, opened his eyes. Chapter 24-25. The Reason of Death. The second Blind Shen opened his eyes. Countless people in the immediate area closed their eyes. The bright light pricked their eyes painfully, especially those cultivators from the four major forces. Some of them even had blood oozing from their eyes. The sight was terrifying. Yi Futian's eyes were still open. Although they hurt a bit, he continued to watch. Blind Shen seemed to have turned into the light itself. His entire body was radiant and bright. It was almost as if he was transparent. He had morphed into a phantom of the light, unleashing its endless brightness at Patriarch Lin. He drowned him with the light in an instant. At the same time, the light was also blasted at the other three cultivators. Patriarch Lin was terrified right now as a monstrous might erupted from him, and his incomparable sword will bloomed. His body soared into the sky, turning into a sword, wanting to escape through the air. Clearly, he had detected a strong sense of danger. He knew that this was no place to linger. He had heard the determination in Blind Shen's tone when he was speaking before. Blind Shen wanted to use his life to take the lives of these other four. He had never intended to stay in the world for long. Before he left, he wanted to take them with him. Patriarch Lin rushed straight into the sky, but the light flooded everything. Afterimages appeared there, but at this moment, even those afterimages had gradually become more and more elusive under the light until they, too, turned into countless spots of light. It was as if it had been purified by the light, reduced into nothing but dust. The purification of light, the divine method of light. The expressions of the other three cultivators were one of great fright. Rumor had it that this was the divine method created by the God of Light and could purify all things in the world. This method was particularly terrifying, and it was said that only the God of Light's heir may learn of this forbidden technique. How could Blind Shen do it, then? However, Blind Shen seemed to be urging this forbidden technique at the expense of the gods. No! There was an unwilling roar that came from the void. A massive face appeared above the sky. It then dissipated little by little, turning into countless spots of light. Someone as powerful as Patriarch Lin, who had survived the divine tribulation, was killed by a single thought, with nothing left. By the time the other three realized something was wrong and tried to escape, the light had already obscured the sky and covered the boundless space. Another phantom appeared above the sky, which was transformed by the shadow of Blind Shen. He seemed to have turned into a deity now, as the light was shining all over the space and directly shrouded the three people who were fleeing. Old Diviner, we have no grievances nor grudges with you. Why resort to such fatal attacks on us? Patriarch Lin pleaded loudly. Old Diviner, I swear I won't touch Chun-Yi. The patriarch of the Yu family also shouted loudly. Their voices reverberated through the boundless void, all begging for mercy in the hopes that Blind Shen would spare them of their lives. Those incomparable eyes of light were emotionless in the void. With a turning of his mind, the light that could purify all things came showering down, directly on top of the three cultivators, drowning their bodies in its brilliance. The three of them let out an angry growl to no avail. They watched their bodies disappearing little by little while their consciousness was still intact. Still, their bodies were disintegrating. The fear in their voices was palpable. It took many long years for them to cultivate to the level they were at now, and they were almost at the very top of the cultivation world. The City of Light aside, even in the lands of the Divine Prefecture and all the major worlds, they were still qualified as top cultivators. And yet, were they to die just like this? The light's purification of the divine method descended, and the three of them gradually turned transparent. Soon, these three top cultivators evaporated from the world. It seemed that in their demise, they had been turned into a part of that light. As of this moment, the top four cultivators from the City of Light were killed. All of them had been killed by Blind Shen. Many cultivators from the City of Light were looking this way, and many more had gathered around. They look at the elusive figure in the void, an existence that was almost akin to a god. Who could have imagined that this was the blind Shin who was walking with a cane not so long ago? The descendants of the four major forces felt a little surreal. It was like they were in a dream. That hunched blind man, who seemed as if he knew nothing about cultivation, had killed off their patriarchs. Previously, many of them had even suspected that Blind Shun was a con man with no abilities whatsoever. Now they realized just how ridiculous that idea seemed in retrospect. However, Blind Shin's form seemed to appear even more elusive at this moment. As if he was unable to turn his head, the phantom above the sky looked toward Futian and said, "My friend, don't forget what I asked of you." "Sir, there was no need to do this." Futian sighed. Blind Shin's smile was enigmatic. Then his eyes drifted in the direction where the portal of light was. His eyes were full of piety once again. Then, his figure gradually disappeared and turned into a light, dissipating little by little between heaven and earth. He got what he came for. As the emissary of light, Blind Shun completed his mission and found the heir to the light. From now on, he was no longer needed in this world. Futian watched him disappear, but there was turbulence in his heart. In the last words left by Blind Shin, he thought of something else. Before Blind Shin, another existence was known as a prophet who had experienced the sitting death just because he took one look at Futian. The prophet claimed that he had peered into the secrets of heaven. Although Blind Shin said it was because his mission had been completed, he would no longer tarry in this world. Was this the real and only reason? If he wanted to, he could have stayed on to take care of Chani even if he had just completed the mission. There was no need to fight the four major cultivators to the death. Then there was another possibility. It might be because of him. Blind Shin told him that because someone else came to him first, he had asked Chani to search for Futian. Then, this whole affair could still be related to his own origin. Why was it that everyone who may know about his origin met a similar fate? Was there something more hidden behind what met the eye? Could he be overthinking the whole thing? Futian had a strong suspicion that Blind Shin's death was just a piece of the puzzle. He might have made a promise, like once Futian helped Chani inherit the light, Blind Shun had to go away. Teacher, Fang Xiyuan and several other youngsters were a little confused. Although they were in the realm of Ranhuang, they had never cultivated outside. This time, as they were following Futian to the outside world, they had been diligently observing everything around them. Futian didn't explain much because there was no way to explain things of this nature clearly. In the meantime, Blind Tai and Huajieyu had come to his side. The cultivators from the four top forces were looking at Futian. Now that Blind Shin and the four great patriarchs had perished together, only the cultivators from the four major forces were left with Futian and his party. A grievance was born today, but other than the four patriarchs, who could possibly touch a hair on Futian? Lin Kong's death was still fresh in their memory. Although there were still cultivators in the peak Renhuang realm among them, none of them dared to attack Futian now. Futian surveyed the crowd, and there was an insouciance in his eyes. These people no longer concerned him since the four great patriarchs had already fallen. He had no problem handling the likes of the patriarchs, so the cultivators from the four principalities were of no interest to him at all. Are they all dead? At this moment, a strange hoarse voice came from a distance, with a degree of wickedness. Then, an extremely tyrannical aura enveloped this space, and everyone who remained expressed a look of concern. Was there still someone of this level hidden behind the scenes? "The more dead, the better," the voice said. Its tone was uncanny. In the next moment, a figure dressed in black appeared in the sky above. Chapter 24-26, Departure. Who is that? Everyone looked quite surprised as their attention was captured by the figure in black that appeared. This man's aura was dark and chilling as he surveyed the crowd below. In the great bright city was another tyrannical cultivator, such as this one who, right under their noses. He looked at the portal of light and said, "I have waited for this day for many years, and now it's finally here. Is this the heir of light?" When he spoke, there was an icy sneer in his eyes. No one knew who he was. Obviously, this person had been keeping himself hidden before, so that he went undetected by the people of the great bright city. Nor had he ever revealed his own strength as he lay in wait in secret. This is disastrous, the cultivators from the 4 major principalities secretly remarked to themselves. They had no idea how long this man had been inside the great bright city, as he had been lurking in the shadows until this moment. No wonder he meant to reap what benefits there were to be had after Blindshin and the 4 patriarchs had fallen. Now, who else could stop someone at this level? The cultivators of the 4 major forces had paved the way for Chan Yi. But now, would Blindshin, Chan Yi, and the others hand over everything to this man in the dark? The man in black redirected his gaze from the portal of light and swept over everyone around. He then released a horrific aura, and suddenly, a dark divine wall appeared between heaven and earth. The wall blocked out all the light and continued to expand to seal off this void. Elder, someone appeared to be quite alarmed at this juncture and said, "We will leave right now and will not interfere in any matter that happens here. The inheritance of the light has nothing to do with us either." A sneer flashed across the man's face, and he said, "Why don't you just sit tight for the time being?" He wanted to see if Chan Yi could really inherit the light. If he were to seize it, he couldn't very well leave any witnesses. Everyone here would have to die. This man harbors a strong murderous intent. "I am afraid no one will be left alive," Hua Qingqing said to Yi Futian via voice transmission. Yi Futian knew that while they were setting the 4 principalities up, this man had been waiting for his moment in the dark. He meant to seize the inheritance. Naturally, he would want to get rid of all the evidence. He had hidden his identity so that no one knew of his existence. If he were able to intercept the inheritance of the Temple of Light, he clearly could not risk anyone knowing who he was. This person's plotting mind was terrifyingly calculating. As if he had sensed Yi Futian's gaze, the man in black looked down at Yi Futian and said, "I'm a little curious about you. Who are you?" "I'm just an ordinary cultivator," Yi Futian replied. The elder's cultivation must not have gone unnoticed in the divine prefecture. "Not many know about me." The man in black said, "How can the person invited by Blind Chin be someone ordinary? You are not forthcoming with your answer. Do you need me to force it out of you?" Yi Futian said, "Of course, if Elder wants to know. I am obligated to explain clearly and thoroughly." As soon as he said that, Yi Futian waved his hand, and suddenly a physical form appeared in front of him. When that body appeared, everyone in the surrounding area instantly felt a strong oppressive force. In the void, the man in black was looking at that body as well. Yi Futian's spiritual soul then came out of his own body and poured into that physical form. Suddenly, the divine body opened its eyes. "That's not right." The face of the man in black became alarmed. Right at the moment when the divine body opened his eyes and raised his head to look at him, his eyes felt a piercing pain. He felt as if that great path was about to annihilate everything. "This is a divine body," he shouted. "You come from the original realm. Elder knows quite a lot." A voice came from the divine body. In the next moment, the divine body broke through the air, and a terrifying divine light appeared between heaven and earth. The man in black wore an expression of pure shock. A horrific aura of the great path descended, and countless divine lights transformed into sword lights, covering the sky and obscuring the sun. That divine body transformed into a sword that seemed to slice open the heavens. Its speed was unimaginably fast, and it cleaved open the sky in but a moment's time. Many looked up at the radiant sight before them. The void that was previously sealed was splitting wide open and riddled with holes. Bang! The body of Shunjia, the great emperor, returned to its place. Yi Futian's spiritual soul, once again, returned inside as he put it away. Looking again above the sky, the figure of the man in black gradually became more and intangible. There was a desperation in his eyes as he looked at Yi Futian, who was down below. He had always acted cautiously in his life, keeping a low profile to avoid attracting any attention to himself. He didn't expect that he would die like this today. This was Yi Futian of the original realm, and that was the physical form of none other than Shunjia, the great emperor himself. If there were any Renhuang in the 8th realm in this world who could slay him, then it could only be the man in front of him. Why did he have to be here right now? The phantom evaporated, and the man in black disappeared from the void. His soul and spirit scattered and dispersed, and he was killed by a single sword strike. The cultivators from all four major forces froze when they bore witness to this scene. They looked at Futian with great horror. How could they have known that he was as frightening as this? Even if Blind Shin didn't open his eyes, the four great patriarchs would have perished in his hands anyway. That physical form was the divine body. Many years ago, it was rumored that in the Shangqing domain, the physical form of Shunjia, the great emperor, had appeared and had been acquired by a young man named Futian. Many top cultivators could not resonate with the great emperor's divine body, but that young genius talent was the only one able to do it. It was said that the young man had amazing talent. Many people had heard of this lore, especially the cultivators from the four top forces. After all, any relic of the great emperor was of great interest in the world and inevitably attracted a lot of attention. The white-haired young man in front of them was that stunning and enchanting figure, Futian. So, it was him. No wonder Blind Shin invited him to come. It would seem that Blind Shin had already known. It was ludicrous that the four major forces wanted to put up a fight. In the eyes of the others, it was but a joke. Futian had never considered them as viable threats. At this moment, Futian turned to look in the direction of the portal of light. He did not bother to look at those cultivators. It seemed as if he didn't care whether they were there or not. This made the four major forces feel particularly self-conscious. It seemed that they were not worthy of being even considered by him. Futian waited quietly. To him, the matter here was not worth the time or effort. He was just a passerby. When Chunny came out, he would be able to embark on the rest of his journey. However, the whole affair with Blind Chun still left some impressions on his mind. Who was behind this? Why did Blind Chun end his life like that? No one could give him the answer to any of this. Anyone who might have an answer was not around him at this time, or that they had fallen. This mystery looked as if it would not unravel anytime soon. Time passed slowly. After a long while, a clear sound was heard. The portal of light showed some fissures, which then shattered and cracked bit by bit. From that portal of light which was breaking apart, a figure walked through. This figure was bathed in divine light. It was Chani. He seemed to have undergone some transformation, and his entire temperament had changed so that he was more like a descendant of the light. When Futian saw this sight, he knew that Chunyi had already inherited the light. He had been successful. Chun walked to Futian's side without saying anything remotely like a thank you, but he remembered everything in his heart. He looked around but did not see Blind Shin. He sighed inwardly as if he knew how things had ended. Indeed, Blind Shin had told him already. "Let's go," Futian said softly. Chunyi nodded. The group then went on their way. Chapter 24-27 The Bodhi Divine Tree. A few months later, a flying boat was traveling through the endless void. The void was full of darkness with terrible spatial turbulences to boot. Some of these turbulences even contained the terrifying and destructive aura of the Great Path. The flying boat was like an unsteady tumbleweed, bumbling shakily through this void. "It's really far," Futian mumbled to himself. A spot of light was floating in front of him, as if a certain coordinate was hiding within, guiding them. It was something given to him by the teacher to guide him in his quest for the location of the Western world. Without such an item, it would not be easy to locate the Western world. It was simply impossible for any ordinary cultivator, who may perish at any moment, to travel through this endless void. Even Futian himself had encountered many dangers along the way while traveling through this space. At the rear of the flying boat, there was Chan Yi, sitting cross-legged, cultivating quietly. He was constantly surrounded by the light, which illuminated the boat. "Teacher, look ahead." At this time, a cry came out, and it was little Ling. She looked into the far distance, where an extraordinary shocking sight emerged in front of them. It was slowly coming into focus in all of its spectacular splendor. "I saw it," Futian nodded. His vision was much better than little Ling, so he had already seen it, but it was pretty fuzzy before. In the endless darkness and emptiness, a golden divine light appeared. A tree, like a tree of the world, was growing in this vast universe. This tree had been endowed with numerous branches and leaves, bright and lush. This towering divine tree was glowing with a golden divine light that seemed to be guiding their way. Futian knew that the divine tree of the world in this vast universe was really quite far away from them, which was the reason why they could see the shape of the divine tree. If they were closer, they would only see parts and not the whole. It was similar to looking up at the night sky and discerning the shape of those stars, or even the formations of stars. The same principle was at work here because the ancient tree of the world was still so far away that it didn't appear to be very large. However, as they were getting closer, they found that it was actually a massive world. The legend is true indeed. The Western world is a Bodhi tree, Hua Qingqing said softly. Her voice was soft and gentle as she looked at the spectacular sight in front of her with some emotions in her heart. Each flower is its own world, and each leaf is a Bodhi tree, as they say. Futian whispered, "What exactly happened after the heavenly path collapsed in ancient times?" The Bodhi tree of the world was once part of the heavenly path. After its collapse, it was scattered to one side. Later, some had proved the way under the Bodhi divine tree, spreading the words of their belief in the Western world. Gradually, the Western world became a part of Buddhism. Hua Qingqing responded softly. The Bodhi divine tree has countless branches and leaves, and if one leaf is one world, then there are many, many worlds. Futian was amazed in his heart by this revelation. They continued to move forward, and sure enough, even at the startling speed they were traveling, the distance seemed to remain the same for a long time. They did not seem to be getting any closer to their destination, so it was obvious that the place they saw was, in fact, extremely far away from them. However, as they kept moving forward, the Bodhi tree eventually became enlarged in their field of vision. The closer they were getting, the bigger it became until they could no longer see the entirety of the Bodhi tree except for countless golden worlds. Vaguely, they could perceive that there were numerous living things inside. Finally, they came to the outer parts of the Bodhi tree, where countless golden divine lights were circulating. In the outer area of the Western world, there was a light screen with what appeared to be golden quicksand. Futian could faintly perceive the power of Buddhism that was contained within as it stood guard over the Bodhi world. "Be careful," Blind Tai cautioned, having vaguely detected the potential danger of this golden quicksand. Even the turbulences of the Great Path were blocked by it and could not find their way inside, which attested to its frighteningly powerful defense. Futian nodded. Suddenly, he was surrounded by divine light, which also shrouded the flying boat. Immediately, sword-shaped runes appeared around the boat. Buzz! The flying boat sped up suddenly, rushing directly into the golden streamers. In an instant, the defense around the flying boat was attacked by a horrific force. The quicksand slammed into their defensive light screen while the flying boat was swept into the storm by the fast-moving quicksand. Futian and the others felt that everything was now spinning out of control, and they could no longer see where they were. They could only feel that the flying boat was traveling at a frightening speed. It was as if they had been swallowed up by that storm of quicksand. Futian did not panic. Although his body was constantly turning upside down and whichever way, he maintained his composure. The life spirit of the ancient tree of the world in his body was swaying as well, and the divine glory of the great emperor was circulating about him. It turned into an absolute sword domain. As it formed a protective cover over the flying boat, it was impervious to all kinds of methods, including the terrifying attack that buffeted them. "Teacher," Little Ling called out. Her body was being knocked about constantly. She seemed on the verge of panic as they were caught up in this storm of quicksand. "It's nothing," Futian replied. Suddenly, a small smile appeared on Little Ling's face. The simple response from her teacher had settled her. She believed they would pull through just fine. After an unknown period of time in this storm of quicksand, Futian and his party finally got tossed out. The flying boat returned to its previous steadiness as they continued traveling in the sky. They found that they were no longer in the outer realms, but were now inside a world. Land. Looking down, land could be seen. It was populated by many cultivators with varied realms. "The Western world is here," Futian whispered, and Chani opened his eyes. "We probably just landed on a leaf of the Bodhi tree," Hua Qingqing whispered, and Futian nodded in agreement. That Bodhi divine tree was synonymous with the entire Western world, and each one of those numerous branches and leaves was a world of its own. They were swept in here by the storm of quicksand. Very possibly, this was just a leaf of the Bodhi divine tree. How come there are not many monks? Feng Siyuan looked down and saw in the distant land. There were not many monks to be seen. Buddhism of the Western world is a supreme principality, but it is a human world, after all. How can they all be cultivating Buddhism? Most of them are cultivators of other sorts. Is it possible that everyone in the divine prefecture cultivates in the same ability as Donghuang the Great? Yi Futian asked him in return. Feng Siyuan scratched his head in confusion and finally replied, I guess that is the case. However, most of the top cultivators here must cultivate in Buddhism, said Yi Futian. They looked forward and saw the clouds seem to have turned into a gold color, and a golden celestial mountain seemed to appear in the distance, floating in midair. Then they heard a long and sustained howl. A huge demonic beast came out of the golden clouds and mist, splitting open the space with incredible speed. The clouds and mist tossed and roared as Yi Futian and the others felt an imminent danger. Soon after, they saw a gigantic golden divine bird swooping down at them. Golden-winged rock. Yi Futian and the others exclaimed as they looked in front of them. They had just arrived, and there was already an attack by the divine bird. Was this some welcoming party? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.